Chapter 750. Hold it. I'm going with you. Bufang frowned and said. Chu Chongqing's body was shaken, and he was rooted to his spot. The people around didn't dare to breathe loudly as they watched the scene. How could that little chef talk to the great elder like that? Hades' era didn't mind them. He just stuffed myriad living things into his mouth, filling his mouth. The dark circles under his eyes had disappeared. He was glowing, looking like a real foodie. He didn't look as strong as before, when he could break the light arrow with just one glance. It was unknown when Saint Daughter Zi Yun arrived behind the Nether King. She stared at the Nether King eating and drinking to his heart's content. As if sensing Zi Yun's curious gaze, the Nether King's movements suddenly stopped. His mouth bulged. He turned to look at Saint Daughter Zi Yun, sniffling. Then, he picked up a piece of bamboo shoot wrapped in a spicy strip. Come, I'll give you a piece. Old Boo's dishes are absolutely delicious. Moreover, he added a divine tool like the spicy strip. You should treasure this piece, said Hades seriously. Saint Daughter Zi Yun's eyes brightened. She brushed the bangs on her forehead, parting her red lips. Hades was bewildered. What are you doing? Aren't you going to feed me? Zi Yun asked, blinking her big eyes. The corners of Hades's mouth twitched. He was the lord of the netherworld, the great Lord Hades. This young man in front of him wanted him to feed her food. Why didn't this little girl go to heaven? After Zi Yun finished speaking, she squinted her eyes and breathed slightly through her nose. Her plump red lips parted slightly. Nether King Ha chewed on the food in his mouth. Looking at Zi Yun's face, the words he wanted to say to reject Zi Yun stopped. Forget it. My mouth is full of food. Talking is too tiring. I'll let this young man take advantage of me. Then, Hades put the chopsticks into Zi Yun's mouth, which was glowing faintly. The oil stained her lips, making them even more alluring. The Nether King glanced at it, then turned his head and continued to eat the food. Zi Yun blushed slightly, as if there were two blushes rising on her cheeks, making her feel a little shy. So delicious. She narrowed her eyes as she savored the deliciousness of the dish in her mouth. The feeling of teasing her taste buds caused her entire body to feel a little numb. It was really a delicious dish, but it was really embarrassing. Big Brother Ha was feeding her food personally. The corners of Holy Daughter Zi Yun's mouth curled up into a smile, and she covered her face with her hands as she leaned over the table and giggled. Hades cast a sidelong glance at Saint Daughter Zi Yun. This youngster has a problem. Chu Chongqing slowly turned around, indifferently looking at Bufang. He held Xiaoye in his arms. The little girl looked like she was struggling, as if she wanted to get out of Chu Chongqing's embrace. However, Chu Chongqing's true energy twirled around her, holding her tightly. She couldn't get rid of him. Do you know where I want to take this little girl? What is it for? Asked Chu Chongqing. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. You said you want to take Xiaoye, but that's after I've lost the chef's challenge against the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Actually, I haven't been defeated once. So, why can't I go with you? If I don't let you take Xiaoye, can you? Bufang said casually. Chu Chongqing's eyes focused, meeting Bufang's eyes. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. The place I want to take Xiaoye to is the target of those invaders. It's the so-called Valley of Gluttony's inheritance, said Chu Chongqing. His entire body seemed to have a glimmer of hope. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance can't fall into those people's hands. Xiaoye is the key to the inheritance, and she's also the inheritor. Once Xiaoye receives the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance, she will be the next Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. Chu Chongqing said enthusiastically. Bufang was bewildered. Xiaoye, Valley Master? Xiaoye was just a fart. Chu Chongqing dared to let her become the Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony? However, if that was the case, this might be Xiaoye's opportunity, Bufang thought, then lifted his head. All right, but the chef's challenge I mentioned still needs to continue. The top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony also want to have a chef's challenge with me. Chu Chongqing was bewildered. He didn't understand. Didn't Bu Fang want to have a chef's challenge to protect Xiaoya? Did he want to have a chef's challenge for the sake of a chef's challenge? Chu Chongqing squinted, looking at Bu Fang suspiciously. However, Bu Fang was still emotionless and calm. Buzz, Great Elder, don't worry. Even if he doesn't want to compete, we won't spare him. While Chu Chongqing was hesitating, suddenly, a clanging sound rang out behind Bu Fang. Lu Tao gazed at Bu Fang, speaking seriously. In his hand was a beautiful kitchen knife with 5-colored radiance, which looked dreamy. This man was Reverie Knife, Lu Tao. Your chef's challenge with me hasn't ended yet. Do you want to run away? Lu Tao's eyes were filled with fighting will. Bu Fang arched his brows, slowly turning around. Oh, I forgot you. Then, let's compete. Let's finish it fast. Bu Fang said. Reverie Knife Lu Tao was dumbfounded. A gleam of anger crossed his face. This kid dared to look down on him. Chu Chongqing looked at the two of them, taking a deep breath, then, he turned around, hugging Xiaoya as he was about to walk out of the Gluttony Gods building. Inheriting the inheritance. He had to be quick. Once the old fellows in the Valley of Gluttony knew about it, it would be troublesome. However, after he turned around and walked a few steps, he heard the sound of a kitchen knife falling on the ground. A moment later, Reverie Knife Lu Tao's voice trembled. I lost. Xiao Bai stepped on the gold shrimpy, his body dashing through the void. His figure flashed, disappearing from his spot in just a blink of an eye. His speed was so fast. Behind him, a series of sonic booms arose. The void seemed to be shattered. The halberd was swung, and light and shadows intertwined. Old Ling of the Heavenly Spring Holy Land wore a cold face. He gazed at Xiao Bai, his eyes filled with murderous aura. His hand shook, and the halberd shot out horizontally. A moment later, the massive halberd head sparkled, and the patterns on the halberd head emitted radiance. Buzz, a torrential waterfall swept out from the halberd. The void shook for a while. Baiguang swept over with rumbling energy waves. He blocked all the gold shrimpies' escape route. Die. This old man is going to tear apart your iron puppet piece by piece. Old Ling said coldly. Boom. The long halberd's waterfall pounded on the gold shrimpy's body, which made Xiaopi's body move a distance away. He fell hard on the ground, rolling one round. Old Ling landed. Holding the long halberd with one hand, the tip of his foot touched the ground. The ground exploded and his body shot forward. Ripples spread out in the air. Boom. All of a sudden Old Ling's eyes shrank. A terrifying aura expanded from the ruins. A moment later, a metal stick that looked like a soldering iron enlarged in his eyes. A moment later, the end of the stick became so big. A clanging sound echoed. The head of the long halberd stabbed the metal stick. Sparks bloomed, and the sound of metal clashing echoed unceasingly. Old Ling's body was blasted away. His feet landed on the ground, causing the ground to crack. After steadying his body, Old Ling's eyes turned to look. That metal stick shrank. With a shake, it tore through the air, whistling as it dashed toward Old Ling. Finally, you have the guts to fight back. Old Ling grinned. A moment later, his body leaned, and the long halberd swung, pounding on the metal stick. Sparks flew everywhere. A ferocious white shadow stormed over. In just 2 steps it had reached him. His fan-like palm fiercely pressed against the metal rod. A huge force surged forth, and Old Ling was fiercely smashed into the ground. The ground immediately caved in, and a deep pit was formed. Xiao Bai's eyes turned completely gray. Steam rose from his body unceasingly. The metal wings on his back opened, and the clanging sounds echoed unceasingly. After swallowing the 3 god-slaying weapons, Xiao Bai's fighting capacity had increased one more time. The aura on his body became more condensed and terrifying. Boom! A whistling sound came from the ruins on the ground. The war god's stick spun and flew away. After spinning a few times, Xiao Bai grabbed it firmly. Old Ling's distressed body stood up from the ruins. His gaze became somewhat cold and ferocious. An almighty level puppet. No. Your puppet can level up? Old Ling's eyes widened as if he had found something unimaginable. The pores on his entire body opened. Although Xiao Bai's fighting capacity was really strong, he hadn't reached the almighty level yet. However, after a short time, the power of the puppet's stick wasn't weaker than an almighty's. It was really creepy. If he allowed this puppet to continue evolving, how terrifying would it become? If it was an enemy, then this puppet must be killed before it could grow up. Thus, Old Ling's halberd shook. His murderous aura shot up to the sky. Die. Boom. Above his head, the soul ladder emerged, and the heavenly spring star shone. His aura had reached its peak. His eyes were cold as he looked at the god slaying Xiao Bai, who was holding the war god's stick as if it was made of iron. Xiao Bai's gray eyes moved. His gray eyes had some black dot. Those black dots moved as if they had a spirit. Boom. One end of the war god's stick fell on the ground, creating a dent. Xiao Bai held the stick with one hand. The metal wings on his back rose as he flew like a goshawk. Feeling the enemy's murderous intent. Die. Reverie knife Lu Tao lost. He was dispirited. Many people around him held their breaths, not daring to breathe loudly. Bufang had only used one blade, and Lu Tao had to admit his defeat in despair. It was beyond people's estimation. Many people hadn't seen the blade that had just appeared, but Lu Tao was the center of Bufang's aura. Of course, he could feel the intimidation of that blade. Bufang slowly wielded the blade that bloomed with gold light. The shadows of the blade gathered, and there were 9 blades in total. Lu Tao seemed to feel a formidable existence looking down on him. That gaze had shattered his state of mind in just a blink of an eye. In the face of absolute tyranny, the so-called dreams were like flowers in a mirror or the moon in the water. Thus, before the battle, he had to admit his defeat. It was an instinctive surrender. One blade and he had surrendered. Bufang shouldered the dragon bone kitchen knife, his face emotionless as he looked at Lu Tao. The knife cabinet emerged. Ouyang Qinfeng forced a smile and took his cicada knife, Lu Tao's reverie knife, and Wang Tong's broken jade knife. Lu Tao was bewildered. Ouyang Qinfeng forced a smile. Wang Tong was indifferent. He just gave Bufang a deep look, then turned around and left. He put away the knife cabinet. Bufang slowly walked away, talking to him. Let's go. Let's go. Chu Chongqing kept silent. This time, he didn't refuse. Shortly, the two of them disappeared from the Gluttony Gods building. Outside the Valley of Gluttony, something boomed. The void cracked, and 2 figures with longbows on their backs appeared. Their eyes were filled with resentment. In another place, specks of starlight appeared, and the void was suddenly torn apart. A lazy man with his chest spread out and yawned walked out. His eyes were half closed, and he looked listless. In another location, a claw tore open the void, and several figures clad in golden armor stepped out. Their target was the Valley of Gluttony. At this moment, outside the Valley of Gluttony, terrifying auras shot up to the sky. They resonated with each other. Those were the auras of the almighty existences. In the Valley of Gluttony, most of the creatures shivered under those auras. Everybody was terrified and desperate. Was it the doomsday of the Valley of Gluttony? Chapter 751. Tap tap tap. Walking through the long corridor of the Gluttony Gods building, the place was quiet and bleak. Bufang was wearing the vermilion robe, walking slowly. Chu Chongqing and Xiao Ye were in front of him. As soon as the 3 of them walked out of the corridor, light shone in front of them. That light was so dazzling that they couldn't help but raise their hands to cover their eyes. They walked in silence for a while. The 3 of them arrived at a familiar place. It was a rather deep and serene intersection. The intersection was very dark, as if it was a bottomless pit that could swallow people. By the side of the intersection, there was a stone stele covered in weeds. The stone stele was covered in moss, which showed that it was quite old. The stele had 3 big, crooked characters: Road of Gluttony. The characters weren't beautiful, but they were full of charm. Apparently, the one who had written those 3 characters was an important character. The first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony wrote those 3 characters. He was an outstanding talent. At that time, he had suppressed the entire Hidden Dragon royal court, making all the Holy Lands not dare to breathe loudly. Chu Chongqing looked at the stone stele, feeling nostalgic as he spoke faintly. The wounds on his body were almost healed, and the bloody holes on his wounds were also rapidly healing. It was the healing ability of an expert at the almighty level. "The inheritance you mentioned is in this Road of Gluttony?" asked Bufang, turning his head to look at Chu Chongqing. Chu Chongqing nodded, his eyes complicated and emotional. That year, he was also someone who had crossed the Road of Gluttony. As soon as Xiao Ye appeared here, she was a little absent-minded. Her big eyes gazed at the Road of Gluttony. Her eyes seemed to be familiar with it, but they were also confused. There were even specks of blazing brilliance blossoming on her forehead. Chu Chongqing rubbed Xiao Ye's head, his eyes filled with pity. "Let's go. We're going to the Road of Gluttony now." Chu Chongqing turned his head to look at Bufang. The corners of his mouth twitched, and his white beard, which was stained with blood, twitched. The Road of Gluttony. He was a little curious. Bufang raised his brows. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the black hole that seemed to be the mouth of a huge beast. However, as soon as Bufang and Chu Chongqing entered, the sound of something tearing through the air arose. In the void, there was a figure walking through the air. The aura on his body was extremely terrifying. "I didn't expect that the inheritance had always been hidden in the Road of Gluttony. Chu Chongqing, that old fool, had hidden it from us." This was an elder of the Valley of Gluttony. However, he was an existence that was planted in the Valley of Gluttony by another force. Not only him, but the other elders also soared through the air, their eyes strange as they looked at the entrance of the Road of Gluttony. Boom, boom, boom. Outside the Valley of Gluttony, a terrifying aura soared into the sky. The few elders' faces immediately revealed looks of excitement. This aura, it was the arrival of a powerful expert from the Holy Lands. It looked like the Holy Lands were finally going all out. The few elders looked at each other and saw the strange look in each other's eyes. Then, they all soared into the sky and sped away. Yen Yu stood in the dark, watching Chu Chongqing and Bufang enter the Road of Gluttony. His eyes were full of malice. His fist pounded on the wall. Since he didn't use his true energy to cover it, his punch just made a dent in the wall. "The inheritance is in the Road of Gluttony. Chu Chongqing didn't choose me. He chose that trashy little girl. Damn it." Yen Yu's eyes were filled with resentment. Why did he stay in this almost ruined Valley of Gluttony? It was because of the inheritance. Without the inheritance, how could this ruined Valley of Gluttony attract a monstrous genius like him? "If you don't want to give it to me, I will fight for it myself. This inheritance, I won't let it go. No one can stop me." Yen Yu gritted his teeth. A moment later, his figure disappeared into the darkness. The 3 golden armored protectors walked out of the space crack. The aura on the 3 of them was extremely terrifying, and the aura on each of them was extremely gloomy. Although they were a little weaker than Old Ling, they were only a step away from entering the Almighty Realm. They were the strongest 3 among the golden armored protectors. If they used all of their powers, they wouldn't be weaker than an Almighty. When they got the news that the golden armored protectors had fallen, they received Amethyst Elder's order to rush to the Valley of Gluttony. It was to help Old Ling take the inheritance. For this inheritance, Amethyst Elder had gone crazy. He had paid a lot. Although they didn't know why the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance could make Amethyst Elder pay so much attention to it, I sensed Old Ling's aura. "He's in that direction," said the golden armored protector, pointing in a direction. Then, the three of them turned into golden beams of light in the void, and flew toward their seats. Chen Gong and Chen Long wore dark faces. They carried the setting sun bow and the shooting sun bow on their back. Their auras were so terrifying, and the void around them seemed to crack. Chen Long was even more terrifying. He wasn't an ordinary almighty. He was a peak half-step divine spirit realm expert. His pressure swept over a radius of several hundred miles. He slowly took the giant bow from his back. This bow was the divine weapon of the wavering light Holy Land, the shooting sun bow. When he shot an arrow, he could shoot the scorching sun in the sky. You killed my third brother. You can't be forgiven. Chen Long's eyes bloomed with tens of thousands of light beams. His eyes were so angry as if he could see through the void, looking into the distance. He saw Chen Tsang's cold body on the ground. He also saw the exterminating sun bow, which had lost its radiance. The flame of anger in his chest rose unceasingly. Ah! Chen Long screamed. His face bloomed with radiance. His hair fluttered as if he wanted to tear the void. His screams were filled with sorrow, and his face was sorrowful. Chen Gong's face was solemn. Sorrow surged in his eyes. He had never thought that his third brother, Chen Tsang, would die tragically in this place. Hades' era swallowed the last bite of his spicy strip. His face was reluctant as he licked his lips. Why did you finish it? Old Boo, eh? Where's Old Boo? I wanted to ask him for some spicy strips. Nether King Er Ha was a little confused. Looking around, he saw Saint Daughter Ziyun, who was holding her face and laughing on the table. Not far from him was Mu Qing, who was still immersed in the taste of myriad living things, and Lu Jieli and the others, whose faces were serious. Far from them were Lu Tao, who had lost his soul, and Ouyang Qinfeng, who wore a forced smile. However, Bufang's figure had already disappeared. All of a sudden, Hades' era sensed something. He lifted his head to look at a place far from them. Over there, an ear-piercing screech was heard. The void thundered. Tens of thousands of spirit energy gathered, as if it wanted to crush this place. What's that? Hades' era was bewildered. In the void, a pair of eyes emerged. Those eyes were filled with sorrow and murderous aura. He fell on Hades' era, his murderous aura rocketing. You killed my third brother. Die. A deafening explosion rang out, causing everyone's eardrums to vibrate, as if they were about to burst. The sixth elder and the others were shaken. They were shivering, and under this pressure, they seemed to kneel down. It was the pressure of a god spirit. An almighty expert at the half-step divine spirit realm. Everybody took in a breath of cold air. How could the Valley of Gluttony have such a formidable existence? Buzz, the exterminating sun bow on the ground, sparkled. A moment later, it soared up into the sky, flying toward the figure in the sky. In just a blink of an eye, it fell into that figure's hand. Chen Long wore a mournful face. His shivering hand caressed the exterminating sun bow, feeling Chen Tsang's aura in it. The flame of anger in his chest rose unceasingly. His murderous aura surged unceasingly. Kill, kill, kill. Destroy the Valley of Gluttony. Kill all of them, bury them with my third brother. Nether King Er Ha took a weed out of nowhere, holding it in his mouth as he looked at the terrifying existence in the void with a satisfied expression. The surrounding people were all trembling. However, he didn't seem to be affected. Half-step divine spirit realm? TSK, TSK, TSK. Boom! Chapter 752. As soon as they entered the road of gluttony, the ground under their feet was full of bumps and holes. Stepping on it made them feel like they were stepping on mud. There were stone walls on both sides of the road, which had many murals. Those murals were simple and direct. Bufang took a look at them, and he knew what they meant. They were talking about spirit beasts roaring at a chef with a kitchen knife. Eventually, they all became ingredients under the chef's knife. It was direct, but it suited Bufang's taste. Chu Chongqing didn't seem to care about those murals. He held Xiaoya and walked forward, his face solemn. As he walked, the crushed stones on the ground made squeaking noises. Bufang followed him. All of a sudden, the scene in front of him changed. Energy surged around them, and the stone walls turned into light curtains. Those light curtains moved like water waves. "What's that?" asked Bufang skeptically. "Do you know where this road of gluttony leads to?" Chu Chongqing didn't answer his question. Instead, he asked back. Bufang was bewildered. How could he know? Thus, Bufang kept silent. "This road of gluttony leads to the bottom of the Sunset Lake. It's also the place where the white Taotai was sealed," said Chu Chongqing. "That place?" Bufang was bewildered. He rubbed his arm with the black and white bandages, nodding. The three of them continued to move forward. Shortly after, they got out of the light curtains. Their surroundings became as magical as the starry sky. The surrounding water was suspended in the lake. There were fishes swimming slowly and aquatic plants floating on the water. It was a tunnel under the lake, which allowed them to see the scenery at the bottom of the lake. All of a sudden, Bufang squinted, lifting his head to look at the giant monster that was swimming past. It was the ancestral alligator. The giant ancestral alligator's blade-like eyes also saw Bufang. Its body swayed, its four limbs covering the tunnel. Instantly, the dust at the bottom of the lake rose. The ancestral alligator opened its mouth, as if it was roaring. It gazed at Bufang. "Get lost." Chu Chongqing frowned, turning his head to look at the ancestral alligator. The ancestral alligator closed its mouth. A moment later, it swung its tail and dashed away, disappearing without a trace. "This ancestral alligator is a good ingredient." Bufang touched his chin and said. Chu Chongqing was speechless, looking at Bufang. The two of them were speechless as they continued forward. Soon, the scene in front of them changed again. At the end of the path, it split into 9 paths, each of which was incomparably dark. This is the road of gluttony. There are 9 paths in total. Each of them is extremely dangerous. However, if you can walk through them, you will have a great opportunity, said Chu Chongqing. The Valley Master built the road of gluttony, so he left good stuff there. There are famous knives, recipes, and even inheritances. Chu Chongqing took a deep breath. Are you saying that the inheritance is in one of the many paths? Bufang asked. No. None of the 9 paths has an inheritance. Chu Chongqing shook his head, denying Bufang's words. No inheritance? The corners of Chu Chongqing's mouth curled, revealing a rare smile. He placed the little girl on the ground. The Valley Master's favorite phrase is 9 in 9 return to 1. I don't know what it means. But I know. I know that the Valley Master won't put the inheritance in any of the 9 paths. Chu Chongqing glanced at Bufang. His hand shook, and a bunch of jade talismans appeared in his hand. Each jade talisman had a different shape. However, when they were combined, they became a round plate. Chu Chongqing sent his true energy into the round plate, making it radiate buzz. As the radiance shone, Xiaoya groaned. Xiaoya's eyes became white, and a bright light that appeared on her forehead. Boom! Rumble! The blazing light spot and the light spot on the disk converged together, shooting out a straight beam of light. The beam of light split into 9 and rushed into the 9 tunnels. Roar! Bufang seemed to hear the beast roaring from the 9 paths. He furrowed his brows. A moment later, the ground began to shake. The entire Sunset Lake was boiling. Rumble! The 9 passages slowly rose up, revealing an even darker passage below. This was the 10th passage. Countless streams of energy gushed out from that path, shining with Xiaoya's aura. A vague figure of a Taotai emerged above Xiaoya's head. The bandage on Bufang's hand also heated up. 2 Taotai souls, one black and one white, emerged from the bandage. They opened their mouths, roaring at the path. Roar! The Sunset Lake boiled as if it was about to explode. A beam of light shot up into the sky from the Sunset Lake. At first glance, one couldn't see the end of it. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance had opened. Chu Chongqing was so excited that his entire body was shivering. Hot tears seemed to roll down his cheeks. Our Valley of Gluttony. Finally we have hope. I hope Xiao Ye can inherit the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. Otherwise, the Valley of Gluttony will be destroyed. A netherworld creature? Mo Liuji looked in that direction, his face shocked. He thought it was absurd. Chunlong was an almighty existence at the half-step divine soul realm. A netherworld creature that could resist such an existence was a top existence in the Great Void realm. How could such an existence appear on the continent? The Great Path's principle restricted the netherworld creatures from entering the continent. If a peak Great Void realm expert wanted to cross the principle to enter the continent, the Hidden Dragon Continent's principle would destroy him. Thus, the creatures that appeared on the continent were either ordinary Great Void realm experts or creatures below that level. Existences above the Great Void realm couldn't appear here. This time, the existence with the explosive aura was above the Great Void realm. No wonder Granny Mo said that the continent would change. There were more and more Great Void realm experts. Was the Great Path's principle going to weaken? Once the continent's principle was weakened, the Hidden Dragon Continent wouldn't be able to resist those terrifying creatures in the netherworld. He had seen a terrifying existence outside of the laws of the netherworld, a huge eye looking at them as if it was looking at food. That feeling still made his legs go soft. Hades' Era coldly looked at the scorching sun arrow. He straightened his body. It was the first time he looked so serious. The terrifying pressure pressed down, fluttering his hair. Black nether chi emerged from his body and wrapped around his body. It was as if it had transformed into a suit of armor that covered his body, causing him to look even taller and more majestic. An arrow to break the sky. Young people these days are really arrogant. The Nether King stood up. Behind him, a huge black shadow appeared. That black shadow was aloof and indifferent, as though it controlled the lives and deaths of tens of thousands of people. Hades' Era held a blade of grass in his mouth. His mouth moved, and a moment later, he spat it out. Swish! The black nether energy wound around the green grass root. The grass root shot out at lightning speed. With a ripping sound, it seemed to tear the sky. It turned into a jet of black light, shooting toward the scorching sun arrow. It was like a moth flying into a flame. The grass root entangled by the nether energy roared and shot out. Above the sky, dark clouds swept over rapidly. Thunder and lightning surged within them, accompanied by rolling roars and flashes of lightning and rolls of thunder. After Hades spat out the grass root, he frowned, looking at the lightning in the sky. The corners of his mouth twitched. However, this time, the aura on his body didn't disperse. Boom! Chunlong's cold eyes watched. He was really confident in his shooting sun arrow. It was his ultimate arrow. In the Valley of Gluttony, who could stop his attack? Die. However, a moment later, his eyes shrank, because he found that his scorching sun arrow was collapsing. It was pierced by a black light arrow. That black light arrow spun, sweeping away the energy he had gathered on the shooting sun arrow. This Chunlong's eyes shrank. His mental energy surged crazily, sensing that black arrow. It was King Blade of Grass? A blade of grass had broken his shooting sun arrow? No. It was the black aura that wrapped around the grass root. That aura came from the netherworld. How dare you? You're a filthy creature from the netherworld. Unforgivable. I Chunlong will kill you. Chunlong was enraged. His aura rose continuously. The 9-step soul ladder emerged above his head. His soul ladder was complete, turning into a platform. There seemed to be an altar on that platform. The altar was cold, but there was no divine flame burning. Above the altar was a star, which bloomed with extreme radiance and released energy. Chunlong drew his bow, shooting the sun. The starlight gathered on the arrow. This arrow, which had gathered his spirit, energy, and soul, had reached its peak. The energy on the arrow tip seemed to jump, tearing the void. Die! Chen Long roared. His fingers loosened, and the arrow shot out. This arrow was much more terrifying than the previous light arrow. However, Hades' Era's face was still indifferent. The phantom behind him slowly opened its eyes. At this moment, the entire world seemed to darken. The dark clouds in the sky became denser and denser, and within them, lightning dragons could be seen rolling. Boom! With one glance, Hades shattered the shooting sun arrow. The terrifying phantom's gaze broke Chen Long's arrow one more time, just like how it had broken Chen Song's arrow. The expressionless face of Chen Gong, who was standing beside Chen Long, suddenly trembled violently. "Big brother, watch out!" Chen Gong's body moved sideways, shouting. His figure suddenly appeared in front of Chen Long. He took out the setting sun bow, shooting an arrow there. Chen Long's arrow shattered, and a grass root with black smoke hissed over. Chen Gong's arrow and the grass root collided, shaking. Hades' Era sighed. He raised his hand, flicking his finger, swoosh. The setting sun bow was blown away, Chen Gong's entire body was pierced through, and he was ruthlessly sent flying. He fell on the ground far away, and was pinned to the ground by a blade of grass. Rumble! In the sky, the dark clouds rolled. A moment later, thunder boomed. A bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the dark clouds, fiercely crashing towards Erha. Era's aura dispersed. He clutched his head, running away. Boom! 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 Hades moved around in the lightning strikes unceasingly. Eventually, he couldn't dodge it, and a lightning strike struck him. His face turned black, and white smoke fumed from his head. He opened his mouth, fuming smoke. Cough! Cough! This great path's principle is naughty. Hades' Era said awkwardly. From a distance, Chen Long felt cold. He couldn't believe his eyes, looking at Hades. A netherworld creature was struck by the great path's lightning punishment, but he didn't die. What kind of netherworld creature was he? Absolutely not a great ethereal realm. Was he a heavenly ethereal realm netherworld creature? Could such a creature enter the continent? Chen Long felt cold all over. He felt that he had encountered a big problem. He had to go back and tell the Alcade Saint. His heart was filled with sorrow. His second brother had died because of him. His third brother was also dead, but he couldn't take revenge for them. With endless sorrow, he gazed at Hades, who was struck by the lightning. Stepping on the void, he turned around, wanting to seize the chance when the other was struck by the great path's principle to tear the void to run away. However, at the moment he was about to run away, goosebumps rose on his entire body. That was because a small, delicate, pitch-black dog paw was slowly swatting at his head from the crack in the void. Chapter 753. Hovering in the air, he couldn't help but cough blood. He couldn't use too much power, and that mangy dog couldn't do much either. In the sky, the dark clouds became denser and thicker. Everything seemed to turn dark. All of a sudden, 3 beams of gold light dashed over from a far distance. Rumble! Old Ling panted, sweat trickling down his body. He opened his eyes wide, gazing at the deep hole in the ruins. Divine light shot out of Old Ling's eyes. The golden armored protectors had come to help him, and they came just in time. This puppet, it's getting stronger the longer it fights. It doesn't seem to be tired at all. Old Ling's halberd had fallen somewhere. Smoke and dust filled the air, and the long stick in front of his chest was pressed against him. A scalding feeling continuously attacked him. Hades' Era was quickly swallowed by the thunder dragon. Lightning arcs shot everywhere, and the entire ground caved in and cracked. One man and one puppet fought, turning the sky and earth dark. Long knife, big halberd, Old Ling, we're here to help you. These 3 golden armored protectors were the top 3 of the 13 protectors. Each of their cultivation base was just a thin line away from the almighty realm. The three of them had created a formation that could even kill an almighty. Rolling his eyes, Lord Go yawned. The three golden-armored protectors also scattered and floated beside Old Ling. Their scarlet eyes looked at the ruins below with a grave expression. At this moment, Xiao Bai was high-spirited. The war god's stick pointed at the two attacks in the sky. A bright blue thunder dragon moved in the clouds. A moment later, it opened its mouth and roared. The Great Path's principal sent down the lightning punishment one more time. This time, it aimed at the torn space slit. Far from them, the golden-armored protectors crawled up from the ground, their faces frightened. Looking at Old Ling, whose head was smashed, their eyes were filled with fear. They didn't hesitate to turn around and run away. The exquisite dog paw seemed to sense the thunder dragon. It raised its paw, and the void slowly closed. Whitey's gray eyes glowed with black spiritual energy. Whitey's fighting prowess soared, and it wasn't weaker than an almighty. The war god's stick became more mysterious. Each time it swung it, the air would tremble. A golden-armored protector shouted. In the next moment, the three of them formed a formation and waved their long swords. Immediately, the swords flashed, as if there was a dazzling light bursting forth. Cloud Mist Restaurant. There was a long howl. Elder Ling's eyes were wide open, and blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth. Old Ling's heart shuddered. He felt a little solemn. This puppet wasn't his opponent before, but now it could suppress him. What kind of force created this puppet? It was so strange. Suddenly, Senior Ling's pupils constricted, and he shouted, "Watch out!" The void seemed to be unable to bear the pressure at this moment. His halberd was King eaten? The puppet's stomach began to spin, and a black hole appeared. His halberd was actually stuffed into the puppet's stomach, as if it was devouring it. Smoke and dust filled the air. God-slaying Xiao Bai. Kill. The ground caved in, shaking violently. This mangy dog was really shameless. Run. Lord Go changed his posture. He pouted his mouth, then continued to snore. Xiao Bai's mechanical voice rang out. A moment later, the gold shrimpy soared up into the sky, hissing. Xiao Bai's figure soared up, landing on the gold shrimpy's back. The gray eyes emerged, and the fan-like hand enlarged in his eyes, grabbing his head. This fool is still so stupid. He doesn't know how to cut the weeds and dig up the roots. He almost let him escape. A netherworld creature that can't be killed by lightning strikes has appeared. If this news spreads out, the entire hidden dragon continent will be in chaos. At that time, a group of old fogies from the netherworld will start to stir trouble again. How can this dog sleep then? After a while, the lightning strikes vanished. Crack! Crack! An oppressive aura swept over, making Old Ling's skin tighten. It wasn't a god-slaying weapon, so Xiao Bai's power didn't increase after eating it. However, Xiao Bai still chose to eat it. Perhaps he had gotten used to it. Swish! A moment later, the war god's stick exerted force, piercing through Old Ling's body, pinning him to the wall. Xiao Bai held the war god's stick in one hand and Old Ling's halberd in the other. If Old Ling was dead, even if they had the formation, they wouldn't be able to resist that puppet. However, that fan-like hand didn't let him go, pressing the ground and rubbing. The lightning punishment of the Great Path's principle could only make Hades look a little distressed. If he were an ordinary netherworld creature, he would have been turned into ashes under this lightning strike. The Great Path's principle represented order, and the lightning punishment represented punishment. Hades' era clutched his hair, which had exploded. A wisp of green smoke arose from his head, twirling around. Hades' face was black, and he looked a little distressed because of the lightning punishment. Chunlong's eyes were crazy. He wanted to shoot the dog's paw that had brought him endless danger. As smoke and dust filled the air, a wave of air rolled up. A red-hot metal rod swept out and ruthlessly smashed into the protector's head. The instant the protector was smashed, he was blasted to the ground like a cannonball. He felt a little aggrieved. To deal with an iron puppet, He had hit himself until he felt weak. He gazed at Xiao Bai. Old Ling felt something sweet in his throat, and he couldn't help but spurt out blood. Swoosh! Qin Long was filled with sorrow. He wanted to travel through the void to escape. The heavenly spring Holy Land's almighty expert had fallen. The 3 golden armored protectors shuddered in fear at that moment. However, they were just distressed. They felt wronged, and they were in pain. If there was lightning, they should use it together. That was right. That dog's paw had given him a crisis he had never felt before. Whitey's fan-like palm slapped out, and Elder Ling's head was instantly smashed like a watermelon, bursting into pieces. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky in shock, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. He was struck by lightning, so how could that dog not be struck by lightning? Wasn't this too unfair to him? Boom! His long halberd, which was made of countless precious materials, was smashed by that black hole. It looked like it had been bitten. Xiao Bai held the war god's stick, and the metal wings on his back flapped rapidly. Each time they flapped, they were like sharp steel blades slashing toward Old Ling. The terrifying sharp energy tore everything around them. The auras of the 3 of them rose, and a shadow of a giant golden armor emerged. Swoosh! He fell into the deep pit. Rumble! However, shortly after, his crazed expression froze on his face, leaving only disbelief. But just as he turned around, he felt a chill run down his spine. That's because there was an exquisite dog paw that was slowly swatting at him from the void. What he saw made his hair stand on end. Holding the war god stick, he stepped on Shrimpy. Buzz, boom! Xiao Bai's gray eyes twinkled. A moment later, the lines on his body glowed and his aura rose. The sound of something tearing through the air echoed. A moment later, a red-hot iron stick pierced through the air, hitting his abdomen and pounding him hard against the wall. The entire wall shook, collapsing unceasingly. The crushed stones on the ground shattered unceasingly. Old Ling was pushed far away. Then, he was flung away. Hades rubbed his hair. All of a sudden, he exclaimed, turning to look at the void where Chen Long wanted to run away. The war god's stick in his hand was like magma erupting. Steam rose from it, and the shadows overlapped, turning into a massive curtain that covered the sky. Old Ling's mind shivered. A ferocious figure stood on the long stick, spreading its metal wings to reveal Hades. The Nether King's figure was revealed. His eyes were filled with tears as he opened his mouth and puffed out green smoke. Xiao Bai held the war god's stick with one hand, swinging it horizontally, hitting Old Ling's body. He had to take several steps back. A crack appeared in the void. The hand holding the long halberd shivered. The soul ladder above his head scattered, and his entire body felt empty. A terrifying aura emitted from the 3 golden armor protectors. Boom! Old Ling felt as though his head was about to be crushed by that giant hand. The light arrow caused the crack to become a little unstable. It wasn't a big deal to Xiao Bai, but to Old Ling, it was a nightmare. The long halberd soared into the sky, its light filling the sky. Old Ling roared, his hair fluttering. He stomped, and the ground cracked. Holding the long halberd, he soared into the sky. It was a sense of vigilance that came from deep in his heart. I can't stand this. I want to eat spicy strips. In the void, a giant halberd shadow emerged, pounding on Xiao Bai, who was standing proudly. Chen Long couldn't resist. He screamed miserably as his body disintegrated under the dog's paw. His aura became extremely weak, and a sense of death suddenly enveloped his body. The soul ladder above Old Man Ling swayed. The light of the stars fell on the ground. How could he eat Bufang's sweet and sour ribs then? Boom! Lord Dog was lying under the path understanding tree. His mouth twitched, and a ball of black smoke rose from the top of his head. Old Ling's hand holding the long halberd hurt a little. It shivered slightly. Each time he attacked, he couldn't help but step back. However, they were panic-stricken shortly after. Boom! That mangy dog has taken action? Xiao Bai stood proudly on Shrimpy, counterattacking domineeringly. Clanging noises echoed. Gold light dashed. Each beam of gold light had a huge machete. The machete looked ferocious and frightening. The hilts were long and slender. Holding it in his hand, energy moved. With a boom, the ground caved in. The long stick blocked in front of them. Old Ling's back hit the ground. His head was pounded. He grunted, and the ground caved in. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes indifferently looked at Old Ling. All of a sudden, his eyes shrank. Blood and flesh filled the sky, swallowed by the void. The golden-armored protector was about to open his mouth. The thunder dragon hit the void, and the crack closed completely. That was why the thunder dragon changed its direction and fell. This phantom's aura wasn't weaker than the almighty realm. Buzz, a frightening collision occurred in this manner. Energy ripples spread in all directions, and the houses below were blown apart by the trembling force. Boom! The light arrow vanished under the dog's paw. The paw was still approaching him, neither fast nor slow. It couldn't resist, and it was getting closer and closer. Hades' Era looked at the thunder dragon falling on his head helplessly. Didn't they say that they would be struck by lightning together? The exquisite dog paw slowly swatted. It wasn't fast nor slow. Terrifying energy gathered, turning into a dazzling light arrow like the scorching sun. The shadow brandished his long saber and swept it horizontally. Under this slash, even the void resounded with a rustling sound. The light arrow had gathered for a long time. Eventually, it reached the peak that Chen Long had hoped for. A moment later, the light arrow shot out, aiming at the dog paw. The red war god's stick looked as if it had just been pulled out of magma. When it was swung, sparks flew. Steam rose from the stick, and the mysterious lines on it rippled unceasingly. That was because a red long rod whizzed over. It was accompanied by the sound of breaking through the air as it ruthlessly smashed into the ground. The shadow of the halberd struck, and the shadow of the knife slashed. Ordinary people couldn't resist the punishment of those who violated the rules. Chen Long's big bow appeared in his hand. Boom! The Nether King grinned, laughing heartily as he looked at the dog's paw that had been struck by lightning. He looked extremely playful. The ruins exploded. The long stick shrank, and the ferocious puppet appeared in front of him. He would bring the news back. The fall of an almighty expert was enough to shake the entire heavenly spring holy land. Holding the stick with both hands, shadows of the stick emerged in the sky. Chapter 754. Hades exhaled green smoke from his mouth, his face bewildered. Why was he the one who got struck by lightning? It wasn't fair. Saint Daughter Zi Yun stood in the distance, looking at Hades with his afro. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. Because of Hades's aloof aura, the feeling of distance between them disappeared instantly. The Nether King shook his head, and his aura spread out, making his appearance clean and tidy again. Then, he raised his head and looked at the sky. The dark clouds, which looked like rolling ink, began to scatter. The thunderclaps gradually quieted down. The dark clouds dispersed and light shone in. The specks of light were like crushed gold, passing through the gaps of the dark clouds and looking down. It was quite beautiful. Under the illumination of the sun, the haze in many people's hearts was dispelled. However, many people were still shocked, looking at Hades. This intimidating man had withstood the lightning without getting hurt. He was an unfathomable existence. Some people's eyes rolled, looking at Hades. They held their breath. Some guessed that the man in front of them was a netherworld creature because the aura he had exuded was similar to the netherworld creatures. However, he was different from the netherworld creatures they had seen before. Anyway, why did the netherworld creatures want to protect their Valley of Gluttony? This man had helped the Valley of Gluttony several times. If he hadn't done that, the Valley of Gluttony would have become a pile of ruins. Basically, the people here had suffered heavy casualties. Moreover, which netherworld creature could withstand the lightning and not die? Thus, the man in front of them wasn't a netherworld creature. Many people thought to themselves as they looked at the Nether King. Gradually, their gazes became brighter. There were fanaticism and admiration. No matter where an expert was, he would always be the center of attention. Hades scratched the back of his head as though he wasn't used to people's gazes. All of a sudden, scattered footsteps could be heard from the ruins in the distance. Then, the crowd looked over and saw a sinister figure slowly walking out from within. Xiao Bai's gray eyes twinkled. One of his hands grabbed the war god's stick, which looked as if it had just been pulled out of lava. His other hand grabbed several corpses as he slowly walked toward them. None of them dared to breathe loudly. Xiao Bai walked in front of Hades and threw the corpses on the ground. With just a glance, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The corpse belonged to none other than the mighty expert who had stood proudly in the sky with a halberd in hand and whose might had shaken the world. Old Ling, the almighty expert of the heavenly spring Holy Land, had his head crushed. The remaining three were golden-armored protectors with tattered golden armor. The protector's helmet was crushed, revealing the wolf heads inside. These were the experts of the Golden Wolf clan. Saint Daughter Zi Yun's pupils shrank as she looked at the corpses on the ground. She was shocked. She looked at the headless corpse of Senior Ling, and her beautiful face revealed a trace of sadness. Old Ling was dead. Saint Daughter Zi Yun was a little sad. No matter what, she was the Heavenly Spring Holy Land's Saint Daughter. Although she wasn't familiar with Old Ling, he was still her senior. She had met him in the Heavenly Spring Holy Land, and now, he was a corpse. Ziyun was so sad that she didn't know what to say. She felt so sad and uncomfortable. Hades' Era looked at Xiao Bai, who had returned ferociously. His face shivered. Then, he grinned. Iron Lump, you're still as wild as before. Xiao Bai didn't mind Hades. His gray eyes raked around for a while, as if he was looking for Bufang. After scanning for a while, he didn't find him. A moment later, the black grains in Xiao Bai's gray eyes moved. A strange wave of energy expanded. Buzz, the Nether King, narrowed his eyes. Boom! Boom! Far from them, a light column shot up into the sky, attracting many people's gazes. That light column carried so many strange symbols and energy. The sixth elder stood up from his seat, his face bewildered. He was so excited. That's the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. It's been sealed for so long. Finally, it's going to open? Lu Jieli's meticulous face had a gleam of light. Mu Cheng's soft body shivered, her red lips curling. We've waited for so long. Finally, the inheritance has appeared. We should go and try. Perhaps we're lucky enough to be chosen by the inheritance? Many of the top chefs on the Tablet of Gluttony had a bright and excited look in their eyes. They were eager to go to the place where the light column burst out. Of course, they knew about the so-called inheritance. At this moment, the Valley of Gluttony's most precious thing was the inheritance. It was also the thing that attracted the Holy Land. A moment later, Mu Cheng and many chefs on the Tablet of Gluttony dashed toward the light column. Xiao Bai's gray eyes twinkled. He shouldered the war god's stick with Xiaopi, who was sleeping soundly on his head. Then, he took a step forward. The metal wings on his back flapped, and he flew out at an extremely fast speed. The moment that light column shot up, the entire Valley of Gluttony was shaken. Many hidden experts made their moves and rushed towards the location of the inheritance. Outside the valley, the sound of something tearing through the air echoed. It was the hidden experts that the Holy Lands had sent. One by one, human figures tore through the air and gathered at the location of the beam of light. Shortly after, many experts stood around the Sunset Lake. They looked at the Sunset Lake in awe, their eyes filled with disbelief. That light column shot out from the Sunset Lake. The lake water was spinning, turning into a massive vortex. That light column shot out from the center of that vortex, shooting up into the sky. Layers of white clouds in the sky moved with the light column. The two sides reflected each other, which was too beautiful to behold. The spirit beasts in the sunset lake were boiling. They kept leaping out of the lake. Sometimes, a giant beast would jump out of the lake, roaring and opening its mouth. Its sharp teeth sparkled under the sunlight. The water vapor expanded, dashing toward people's faces. It was the ancestral alligator. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance was at the bottom of the sunset lake? Many people were a little bewildered. After hesitating for a while, they directly jumped into the water. However, there were so many wild spirit beasts in the water. As soon as that person fell into the water, he would be attacked by the wild spirit beast. At this moment, those spirit beasts were extremely violent. That expert was wounded badly, coughing blood. He hurriedly ran back to the shore. Although many people had found the source, it seemed that getting to the inheritance land had become a difficult problem. Unless an almighty expert took action, facing so many wild spirit beasts, no one could endure their savage aura. Hades' era followed Xiao Bai, walking slowly. His pace wasn't fast, but he could always catch up with Xiao Bai. Contrary to the others, Xiao Bai wasn't heading toward the sunset lake. Hades followed Xiao Bai, and Saint Daughter Ziyun followed Hades. Soon, the two of them and the puppet reached an intersection. They stopped in front of this intersection. The intersection was deep and dark, like a spirit beast opening its mouth to swallow people. Road of Gluttony. Hades gawked, reading the stone tablet by the side of the dark road. This place was far from that light column. Why did that iron lump Xiao Bai bring them here? Xiao Bai didn't say anything. He shouldered the war god's stick and stepped into the road of Gluttony. Hades whistled, glancing at Saint Daughter Ziyun before stepping into the road of Gluttony. What could Saint Daughter Ziyun say? Wherever Era went, she would go. Bufang slowly followed Chu Chongqing. They stepped on the 10th road. The further he went down the path, the denser the spirit energy became. Bufang could feel that the spirit energy around him was about to condense into a substance. He could even see drops of spirit energy floating in the air. When he touched them with his finger, those drops scattered. It was the phenomenon when the spirit energy had reached a certain level. Two Taotai souls, one black and one white, floated by Bufang, roaring and roaring ferociously. "Where's the inheritance?" asked Bufang skeptically. "How could I know? I only know that this is the land of the inheritance. However, I don't know where it is," said Chu Chongqing with a forced smile. There was nothing down there, which was out of Chu Chongqing's expectation. Where was the land of inheritance that was supposed to be? This caused his heart to involuntarily turn cold. Without the inheritance, the Valley of Gluttony was finished. "Put the little girl down," said Bufang. Chu Chongqing was bewildered. He put Xiaoya down. Xiaoya was glowing, and her big eyes were wide open. She looked like a holy angel, and her aura fluctuated unceasingly. Bufang rubbed Xiaoya's head, his face emotionless. Then, under Chu Chongqing's surprised eyes, Xiaoya strode toward the empty land. Xiaoya stumbled and stumbled as if she was going to fall at any moment. Anyone who saw her would feel sorry for her. Bufang lowered his hands, his face solemn. All of a sudden, the vermilion robe on his body fluttered, which surprised him. Raising his hand, he felt a gust of wind pass through his fingers. "The wind is blowing," said Bufang casually. Chu Chongqing was bewildered. He didn't know what Bufang meant. In the next moment, his pupils shrunk. He realized that the ground in the distance had suddenly trembled and an array had appeared. Rumble. The ground trembled and cracked. Then, a huge creature slowly rose from the ground. As the giant creature soared up, Chu Chongqing's face was illuminated in gold because the giant creature in front of him was gold. It was an incomparably majestic gold palace. The wind grew stronger and stronger, causing everyone's hair to flutter unceasingly. Chu Chongqing was surprised. A moment later, he was filled with excitement. Tears sparkled in his eyes. His mouth trembled as he was so shocked. It's the first Valley Masters. Glutton God's Palace. He didn't expect that the glutton god's palace, which had disappeared for so long, was still in this land of inheritance. Chu Chongqing thought that the glutton god's palace had been divided by those bastards from the Holy Lands. Turns out the glutton god's palace had always existed in the Valley of Gluttony. If the glutton god's palace appeared, would the inheritance be far away? The first Valley Master's cultivation technique inheritance, cooking skill inheritance, and so on, they were the hope of the Valley of Gluttony's revival. Boom! The massive gold palace stabilized. Rocks rolled from all directions. It was majestic and imposing, giving people a suffocating solemn feeling. Xiao Ye lifted her head, standing in front of the glutton god's palace's massive city gate. She looked so small and cute. The glutton god's palace's city gate was also made of gold. There were round nails on the gate, and 2 knockers pierced through the Taotai statue's mouth. It was so heavy. The center of the city gate had a round pattern, which was exactly the same as the one on Xiao Ye's forehead. A light beam shot out from Xiao Ye's glowing forehead, shining on the gate. Instantly, the gate shook heavily. Then, it let out a long, ancient squeaking sound, squeak, squeak, squeak. The heavy, gold-cast city gate slowly opened. The gold city, which had been sealed for so many years, slowly opened. The city gate opened. It was pitch black inside, so deep and dark. All of a sudden, Bu Fang and Chu Chongqing felt their bodies tighten. In the next moment, a huge and narrow figure dashed out from the city. It widened its ferocious fangs and instantly bit down on Xiao Ye, who had her head raised. Chapter 755. The Gold Palace's gate opened. Inside that pitch-black gate, which looked like a black hole that could swallow everything, a gust of wind roared and howled. A moment later, a giant figure dashed out of the gate. It opened its mouth, revealing its sharp fangs. It aimed at the adorable Xiao Ye, who was standing at the city gate, raising her head to bite. Chu Chongqing and Bu Fang were caught unprepared by this scene. Chu Chongqing's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He roared and his aura soared. Bu Fang furrowed his brows, his face slightly changing. Boom! It was too late. In just a blink of an eye, the giant beast slowly spiraled, wrapping Xiao Ye inside. Its gold scales sparkled, reflecting the dazzling light. It was a snake-type spirit beast with 2 lumps on its head. Its eyes were sharp, and its head was buried inside its coiled body. Xiao Ye was inside. Evil creature! Chu Chongqing's eyes reddened. He had never thought that something like this would happen. A spirit beast like that would jump out of the glutton god's palace. Was it the glutton god's palace's guardian spirit beast? Damn it! He had calculated so many things, but he had missed this one. Chu Chongqing's hair fluttered as he roared. His aura soared. Then 2 kitchen knives hovered around his body. The knives hissed, tearing the air. Chu Chongqing took a step forward, shooting out as fast as lightning. A soul ladder emerged above his head, stacking on top of each other. His aura became more intimidating. Finally, his aura reached the almighty level. Evil creature! Pay with your life! Chu Chongqing's anger roared like mountains and rivers. He punched, his true energy surging, aiming at the spirit beast. The giant snake-type spirit beast rolled, its scales sparkling. A moment later, it lifted its head, opened its mouth, and roared at Chu Chongqing. It stuck out its tongue, hissing unceasingly. The gold tail swept over. Chu Chongqing felt terrified, his mind shivering. Boom! His punch landed on the tail, and he felt as if he was shaking the sky. His body cracked like beans being fried, and he was sent flying by the tail. Boom! Chu Chongqing landed, coughing blood. His aura was dispirited. He struggled and fell to the ground, his eyes full of disbelief. A single strike, and he was defeated. His current strength was at the almighty realm, but he was swept away by the spirit beast's tail. How powerful was this spirit beast? Was the Valley of Gluttony really going to be finished like this? I can't accept this. I finally found the inheritance, but in the end, I failed in such a sullen manner. He was really unwilling. Roar! A terrifying gust of wind arose. The giant gold snake hissed and hissed, as if it was enraged by Chu Chongqing's provocation. Sand and pebbles flew from the ground as a gale blew. This was an extremely terrifying spirit beast. Bufang was sure that it was much stronger than the black and white Taotais. Chu Chongqing had been defeated in one strike. This was enough to explain the problem. He furrowed his brows and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife suddenly appeared in his hand. As he infused it with true energy, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife turned into a resplendent golden color and soared into the sky. Roar! A dragon roar reverberated. Bufang's domineering aura diffused as he pointed his knife at the giant gold snake. Chu Chongqing's eyes were blank. His mind was dead and he was desperate. The giant snake hissed, hissing at Bufang. It was so afraid of the knife in Bufang's hand. From that knife, the giant snake could feel an aura that made its heart beat faster. Bufang's face was emotionless. The vermilion robe on his body fluttered as his aura condensed. 1 knife light, 2 knife lights, 3 knife lights. 9 consecutive blade lights converged, turning into a blade light that nearly tore the sky apart. Overlord 9 blades. Bufang's face was indifferent as he said that. Then, he wielded the dragon bone kitchen knife, slashing at the giant snake. Behind Bufang, there seemed to be a huge phantom image appearing. That phantom image was carrying a broadsword, and following Bufang's movements, it slowly slashed down. Boom! Boom! The void seemed to shake. A moment later, the knife light shot everywhere, and the clanging sounds echoed unceasingly. The giant snake roared, opening its mouth. Its scales bloomed with radiance. Boom! The Overlord 9 blades congregated into one slash, fiercely slashing. The power of the 9 blades stacked together, which was extremely terrifying. However, when this blade slashed the giant snake's head, it just shook a little. Sparks flew, but it couldn't even break the snake's skin. Bufang's brows arched and his heart shivered. This giant gold snake was really awesome. No wonder why its tail had almost flung Chu Chongqing to death. Roar! Feeling a little pain, the giant gold snake roared. Instantly, its body dashed away. The air was so compressed that it emitted a sonic boom. It opened its mouth, aiming at Bufang to swallow him. Bufang's hair fluttered in the wind. The velvet rope that tied his hair was broken, and his hair fluttered everywhere. Bufang squinted, watching the giant snake bite him. The vermilion robe on his body began to glow. The invincible defense was about to be activated. However, the originally violent clamor suddenly stopped. That giant serpent opened its mouth wide and hovered above Bufang. A terrifying aura spread out, causing the surrounding rocks to shatter. The giant snake didn't bite him. Everything seemed to be still. Bufang was a little bewildered, lifting his head to look at the giant black mouth. Hua, be good. Don't hurt big brother. Gulp. Above the giant gold snake's head, a flashing formation emerged. Then, Xiao Ya's petite body emerged from the giant gold snake's skin. Xiao Ya lay on the snake's head, reaching out her chubby little hand to stroke the snake's head. After being comforted, the giant snake didn't move anymore. Slowly, it closed its mouth and shrank back into its body. What? Xiao Ya hadn't been digested yet? Bufang looked at Xiao Ya, who was safe and sound. His brows arched, and his heart relaxed a little. From a distance, Chu Chongqing gawked and dropped his jaw. It turned out that the giant snake wasn't an enemy. It didn't eat Xiao Ya. Chu Chongqing suddenly felt gloomy. Then, why did he have to endure that giant golden snake's tail? He felt as if his internal organs were about to explode. Xiao Ya, that little girl, didn't say anything to remind him. Why was the gap between them so big? Why did that little girl remind Bufang when it was his turn? The giant golden snake shrunk back and slowly lowered its head. Xiao Ya leaped down from it. The giant snake flicked its tongue, licking Xiao Ya's face. The little girl felt ticklish, giggling. Bufang looked at such a loving scene, and the corners of his mouth convulsed. He glanced at Chu Changsheng, who was lying on the ground, twitching. He didn't know if he should say something to comfort him. However, he didn't think it was necessary. What Chu Changsheng needed now was some quiet time. Fortunately, although Chu Changsheng was hurt badly, he was an almighty expert. His body's recovery ability was much stronger. As long as his head wasn't crushed, he just needed to lie there, and he would recover in a short while. Buzz, after shaking for a while, the giant snake's body shrank. Shortly after, it turned into a little girl as big as Xiaoya. However, that little girl had 2 small golden horns on her forehead, and she was wearing a golden dress. Bufang blinked. The giant snake had turned into this cute little girl. It didn't look right, did it? After Hua had turned into a little girl, she hugged Xiaoya. She squinted, taking in Xiaoya's scent. Her face showed that she was enjoying it. Big brother, this is Hua. She's a friend I've just met. Hua said that she's been in this palace since she was born. She's waiting for me, Xiaoya said to Bufang. Hua lifted her head, wrinkling her nose. She placed her hands on her hips, glaring at Bufang. It seemed she wasn't satisfied with the scene where Bufang had used a kitchen knife to chop her head off. From a distance, Chu Changsheng staggered to his feet, his face aggrieved. As she could injure him with just a tail, even if this Hua wasn't in existence at the divine spirit realm, she wasn't far from it. However, the giant snake that had wounded him with just a tail was still in its juvenile form. How could it be a little kid? It was so strong in its juvenile form. Oh my God, what kind of spirit beast was it after all? Bufang was also somewhat curious, so he silently asked the system in his heart. Chu Changsheng didn't know, but the system definitely knew. The 7-colored sky-devouring python is a pure-blooded divine beast from the ancient times. Every time it molts, its body will have 1 more color, and its power will increase. When the 7 colors gather, it can become the 7-colored sky-devouring flood dragon. After the tribulation, it can become a dragon. This time, the system's answer was quick and concise. Bufang's mind flickered, and the system told him Hua's information. After listening to it, Bufang couldn't help but take a deep breath. A pure-blooded divine beast from the ancient times, pure-blooded. It was a real divine beast. It wasn't like the black and white Taotai, which only had a little bit of divine beast blood in their bodies. Bufang's eyes brightened. Looking at the cute Hua, he blinked. The 7-colored sky-devouring python. Very cool, said Bufang. Xiaoya and Chu Changsheng were bewildered, but Hua, who was puffing her cheeks, was bewildered. She looked at Bufang in astonishment. She didn't expect that Bufang would recognize her. However, she didn't say anything. If he recognized her, so be it. This human had used a kitchen knife to hit her head. It was wrong. Rumble! Rumble! A noise arose from the gold palace. Hua's eyes brightened. She grabbed Xiaoya's hand and dashed toward that place. Bufang and Chu Changsheng exchanged looks. Bufang wore an emotionless face as he shouldered the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, striding toward the palace. Chu Changsheng bared his teeth. His hands trembled as he stroked his beard. He was a little reluctant, but he didn't enter the palace. Instead, he sat cross-legged in front of the gold palace. He wanted to protect Xiaoya to complete the inheritance. He wanted to stop anyone from entering the palace. Footsteps echoed in the darkness from a distance. Chu Changsheng squinted. He stopped sucking in his breath, looking at the darkness in the distance. There, a figure slowly emerged. Chapter 756. The green smoke in Bufang's hand dispersed, and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife disappeared. He clasped his hands, following behind Xiaoya and Hua, watching the 2 little girls hopping toward the gold palace. The vermilion robe on his body glowed, and the 2 Taoya's souls and the black and white bandages on his hands were shaking. As soon as he entered the gold palace, Bufang felt a wave of cold energy assaulting him. Every step he took left an echo in the quiet and serene palace. Buzz, boom, boom. All of a sudden, Bufang took a step forward, and the entire palace trembled. Beams of light instantly flowed out, causing the entire palace to brighten up. Bufang squinted his eyes and finally saw the scene inside the palace clearly. Actually, it wasn't just a palace. The Gold Palace had several smaller halls, and each of them had a tightly shut door that looked like it was made of gold. It was extremely heavy. At this moment, Bufang was in the first hall, and the center of the hall was filled with broken eggshells. The eggshells had a dim seven-colored luster, and the essence on them had disappeared. Bufang looked at the eggshells, then at Hua in the distance. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Could this be the shell of the seven-colored sky-devouring python? As if sensing Bufang's gaze, Hua turned her head and glared at Bufang. A moment later, she waved her hand, and the eggshells on the ground were collected by her. Hua snorted at Bufang, then pulled Xiaoye and ran toward the palace. Shortly after, they disappeared. At first, Bufang wanted to follow them, but he felt that he was being held back by an aura. There seemed to be a terrifying energy pouring out from each of the palaces. This energy lingered in the main hall, forming a unique fluctuation that made people's minds tense up. Knife Skill Hall, Recipe Hall, Cooking Ingredient Hall, Kitchenware Hall. Bufang's gaze turned slightly, and when he saw the words on the horizontal board of each of the halls, his expression involuntarily froze. This is the Valley of Gluttony's Inheritance Palace? It's really simple, direct, and violent. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth. In the next moment, without much hesitation, he directly walked towards a branch palace. Xiaoye was protected by Hua, a young ancient divine beast, so there shouldn't be any problems with her safety, unless Hua ate Xiaoye. But if he wanted to eat Xiaoye, he would have done so long ago, so there shouldn't be any danger. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang quickly arrived in front of the Knife Skill Hall. He raised his hand. Her slender and fair fingers were faintly discernible under the illumination of the radiance. It was a beautiful sight to behold. He pressed his palm against the ice-cold golden door. True qi surged as his arm exerted strength. In the next moment, the door of the Golden Branch Hall emitted a deep creaking sound as it was slowly pushed open. Pushing the door open, Bufang naturally stepped in. The hall was pitch black. With a boom, the door behind Bufang closed, and the entire space became even darker. Not a single beam of light could be seen. However, not long after, a brilliant light flickered in the branch hall. At the top of the branch hall there was a huge gemstone. The gemstone was bright and emitted a gentle radiance. The radiance was white but not dazzling. It illuminated the entire space of the branch hall. However, as the gemstone shone brightly, Bufang's eyes shrank. He lifted his head to look into the distance. He discovered that in the center of the hall there was a person sitting on a chair. It was a man wearing a mask. His aura was so mysterious that people couldn't see through him. This golden palace that had been sealed for God knows how many years actually had someone in it? Buzz. Buzz, the clanging sound of knives arose. A moment later, kitchen knives flew out from every direction. It was like the wave of a kitchen knife. It was terrifying. The kitchen knives filled the sky, and the knife energy they emitted made Bufang's skin tighten. "Welcome to the Knife Skill Hall. I've been waiting for you for a long time," said the man. "Knife Skill Hall?" Bufang mumbled, his face emotionless. "This is the Inheritance Palace. The Knife Skill Hall naturally imparts knife skills. There are 360 kitchen knives in the hall, and 5 of them are famous knives. Before you came here, one of the famous knives had already been taken, so you only have the chance to choose between the 4 famous knives," the figure said. Bufang was a little bewildered. Before he came, one of the famous knives had been taken. Who could it be? Could it be Xiaoye? Was this the so-called privilege? Bufang thought. A moment later, the man stood up from his seat. "Do you want to know how to get the inheritance?" This is the knife skill of the First Valley Master. It's the strongest knife skill that everyone dreams of, said the man. He walked down step by step, heading toward Bufang. The strongest knife skill? Bufang narrowed his eyes. This guy is really arrogant. If you want to get the knife skill inheritance, you have to get the recognition of a famous knife and show your talent. Within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, you have to learn one level of the knife skill. Otherwise, you will lose the inheritance and be erased. The man walked to Bufang's side, almost whispering into Bufang's ear. His words were filled with an awe-inspiring warning. If an ordinary person heard it, they would feel a chill down their spine. However, Bufang wasn't an ordinary person. He tilted his head, his eyes indifferently looking at the masked man. A moment later, he raised his hand, pressing on the man's shoulder. A cold feeling spread into his hand, and he slowly pushed the man away. Step by step, Bufang walked toward the dazzling kitchen knives floating in the air in the distance. The masked man seemed to be smiling. He clasped his hands, looking at Bufang. Bufang walked step by step. Soon, he reached the wall of kitchen knives. He raised his head, the wind blowing. All of a sudden, Bufang felt a wave of heat attack his arm. Bufang was bewildered. Green smoke twirled around his hand. Instantly, the ancient, pitch-black golden dragon bone kitchen knife fell into Bufang's hand. As soon as the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared, an invisible pressure spread out from Bufang's body. The densely packed kitchen knives immediately stopped trembling, as if they had been intimidated by him. At the same time, Bufang's spirit sea was surging with waves. Bufang's spirit returned to his body. As soon as he entered the spirit sea, he heard a dragon roar echoing in his head. The golden dragon tool spirit emerged. Its giant head drooped, gazing at Bufang. Being stared at by the golden dragon tool spirit, Bufang's spirit shrank. The tool spirit opened its mouth, roaring. Bufang's spirit left the spirit sea, and the dragon roar echoed in his ears. The kitchen knives hovering in the air were shattered by the dragon's roar. Explosions echoed unceasingly. In the end, only 4 shining kitchen knives were left floating in front of Bufang. No doubt, these 4 knives were the famous knives the masked man had mentioned. They were also the key to receive the inheritance. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife was really domineering. With a dragon roar, it could shatter the other kitchen knives, including many precious ones. The masked man was petrified. He crossed his arms, standing in the distance. His eyes sparkled under the mask. Host! Devour them! In Bufang's spirit sea, the golden dragon tool spirit's roar echoed, raising stormy waves. A moment later, the ancient, black dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand became ferocious. The 4 famed blades in the sky also blossomed with dazzling brilliance, and there were even artifact spirits emerging from them. Roar! However, with just a dragon's roar, Bufang saw the vague body of a golden dragon rush out of his golden dragon bone kitchen knife. The golden dragon hovered, directly swallowing the tool spirits on the knife. The tool spirits of the famous knives couldn't resist for a long time. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife's tool spirit swallowed them, crack. After losing their tool spirits, these kitchen knives were covered with cracks. A moment later, they turned into scrap metal like ordinary kitchen knives, shattering and falling. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife seemed to have eaten its fill. After a burp, it returned to the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife became black again. However, Bufang's mind and the tool spirit's heart became more connected. In the distance, the masked man gawked and dropped his jaw. Those were 4 famous knives. How could they be destroyed just like that? How did that guy destroy them? The man's eyes were dull. He didn't dare to believe it. Seeing the famous knives shatter with his own eyes, he wondered what level the knife in that kid's hand was. Why was he so domineering? Bufang was a little speechless. He shouldered the kitchen knife, indifferently glancing at the man. Buzz, right after the famous knives were broken, a beam of light shot down. A moment later, a vague, burly figure emerged in front of Bufang. That figure held a kitchen knife. A moment later, the knife began to fly around his palm, spinning one round in his hand. Its speed was as fast as lightning, which was hard to catch. It was so steady and cool. This was the knife skill of the inheritance. Bufang looked at it, blinking his eyes. Sensing the display of the knife skill. Now recording and simulating, while Bufang was carefully recalling the skills, the system's serious voice arose in his head. The system recorded this knife skill? Didn't that mean that he could learn fast? Bufang arched his brows, glancing at the masked man in the distance. The corners of his mouth seemed to reveal a playful smile. Tap tap tap. The sound of footsteps echoed. Chu Chongqing sat cross-legged in the palace, his eyes looking at the darkness. Shortly, a figure emerged. When Chu Chongqing saw that figure, he was bewildered. That figure wasn't anyone else. It was Yen Yu, the first chef of the Tablet of Gluttony. Special grade chef Yen Yu. How did he know the entrance to the inheritance land was here? Chu Chongqing's eyes shrank, his face cold. It's Yen Yu. Yen Yu's eyes were bright as he looked at the giant gold palace behind Chu Chongqing. His entire person became fanatical. I finally found the inheritance. This inheritance belongs to me. No one can take it away from me. Yen Yu. Back off for this old man. This inheritance. You don't have the right to covet it. Chu Chongqing shouted, his face cold. He didn't think that Yen Yu would appear here. It was beyond his expectations. However, regarding the inheritance, Yen Yu didn't have the right. Sizzle. Sizzle. Yen Yu coldly looked at Chu Chongqing from the corner of his eyes. He raised his hand and a blue jade talisman appeared in his hand. He activated his true energy, and blue lightning arcs danced on the jade talisman, turning into shackles. You old fool! If this inheritance doesn't belong to me, who does it belong to? That useless little girl? I am the first chef of the Tablet of Gluttony. Except for me, no one can take this inheritance away. You are now a cripple. Can you still stop me? Yen Yu burst out laughing. The jade talisman cage wrapped around Chu Chongqing's body, and the numbness from the lightning struck him, making him fall to the ground. Damn it! Chu Chongqing's eyes widened. He wouldn't allow Yen Yu to destroy the inheritance. Yen Yu was enraged. He swung his hand, and another jade talisman flew out. That jade talisman hit Chu Chongqing's body, making him convulse. This is the ancient jade lock? You are from the ancient jade holy land. Chu Chongqing felt the pain in his body, coughing blood. His already serious injuries became even more severe. He hated it. If his injuries weren't so serious, even if Yen Yu had the ancient jade lock, he wouldn't have been able to restrain him, but today, he was tricked. You are worthy of being the great elder. You know your stuff. The ancient jade lock that collects lightning is the signature of the ancient jade holy land. If you are trapped under the ancient jade lock, your divine soul will be slowly destroyed. Great elder, you can die without regrets. Yen Yu laughed. All of a sudden, his laughter stopped. It was because another set of footsteps came, echoing in everyone's ears. How could someone know about this intersection? Chu Chongqing and Yen Yu were startled. They looked into the distance. Chapter 757. The light column shot up into the sky. Gradually, something mysterious expanded. The clouds in the sky slowly moved, turning into a vortex that covered the sky. The lake water on the ground also spun and turned into a whirlpool. Spirit beasts emerged from the lake water one after another and spat out essence energy at the beam of light, reflecting each other's brilliance. The experts on the lakeside had their eyes twinkling as they gazed at the light column. Their hearts surged unceasingly. They knew that the location of the pillar of light was where the inheritance was located. It was the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. How could they not be tempted? It should be known that the Valley of Gluttony, at its peak, had suppressed many holy lands. If they could get that inheritance, it meant that they could get a lot of resources, which could push their power to a terrifying realm. To any expert, it was a temptation. However, at this moment, this temptation was in a dangerous situation. Each of the spirit beasts in the Sunset Lake was breathing in and out essence energy, as if they were enjoying this rare opportunity. Spirit beasts needed opportunities, and so did humans. Once they clashed, it would be a massacre. Some experts couldn't bear it anymore. As time ticked, some experts hesitated, but in the end they chose to rush and kill. An expert took a step forward, dashing into the Sunset Lake. With a boom, the lake water exploded. The spirit beasts in the lake opened their mouths, crazily attacking the experts in the Sunset Lake. One expert was like water. Many other experts also entered the water and rushed into it. True energy filled the air. Blade light and sword shadows shot up to the sky. The lake water exploded. Blood diffused, covering the sky and the sun. At this moment, the lake water was dyed blood red. Roar. Powerful spirit beasts roared, but the experts weren't afraid. For the inheritance, they risked their lives to kill each other. The battle went on for an unknown period of time. The vortex on the lake's surface had become blood red, moving. The light column had dots of blood light, which made people's hair stand on end. Finally, the spirit beasts retreated. The experts dove crazily, swimming toward the end of the light column. Soon, the former sank to the bottom of the valley, but what they saw next left them dumbfounded. The beam of light came from the bottom of the lake, but there was no entrance. The beam of light came from the bottom of the lake. All the experts trembled. They looked at each other in dismay, then roared and roared. Some experts attacked the ground in a frenzy, but they were unable to blast the ground apart. Instead, they were smashed into pieces by a terrifying backlash, turning into a bloody mist. As a result, all the experts who had dived down frantically rushed towards the surface of the lake. Walala! Experts soared into the sky like cannonballs and instantly drilled out of the lake. Water splashed everywhere as they landed on the shore. These experts' faces were filled with shock and anger. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. After someone calmed down, he opened his mouth and roared. Wrong. They were all wrong. The entrance isn't here. Chu Chongqing's entire body was shaking. The ancient jade lock. It was a terrifying spirit talisman that could imprison experts. It was a spirit talisman that the ancient jade Holy Land had researched to imprison divine soul realm experts. He had never thought that Yen Yu, who ranked first on the tablet of gluttony, was from the ancient jade Holy Land. At this moment, he felt a burst of sorrow. The Valley of Gluttony was really desolate. Even the tablet of gluttony, the list they were so proud of, had been invaded by the Holy Land. When the Holy Land had sent people to infiltrate the Valley of Gluttony's Elder Committee, he couldn't do anything about it. No matter what, the Valley of Gluttony was weak. However, the Tablet of Gluttony was the Valley of Gluttony's pride. It was a list they had relied on their power to occupy. Chu Chongqing screamed. No one knew if it was because of the pain in his heart or his body. His entire body was sealed by lightning, which made him look so pitiful. Yen Yu's face was cold. He didn't look like he couldn't bear it. He was resentful and angry. That old man Chu Chongqing didn't want to give him the chance to receive the inheritance. No one knew how much he had paid for it. However, in the end, he was defeated by a little girl. How could he be willing to accept that? The sound of footsteps arose. Several figures walked in from outside. The leader was a ferocious-looking iron puppet. It carried a burning red war god's stick, and its terrifying aura instantly diffused. Yen Yu's eyes shrank and his body slightly shivered. This puppet had always been following Bu Fang. Its fighting capacity was really strong, and it could fight against an almighty existence. Yen Yu couldn't afford to provoke it. His eyes swept around, and he saw the two people behind the puppet. One of them had a good figure, and she was extremely beautiful. Her purple hair fluttered, making people's breaths stop. The other person was a handsome man. Seeing that man, Yenyu took in a breath of cold air. His eyes were filled with anger and murderous aura. It was this guy who had sent him flying with just a finger. He had even snatched his position as a judge. To him, it was a great humiliation. That kind of humiliation made Yenyu hate that he couldn't tear him into pieces. Yenyu didn't know Hades's real cultivation base. If he had seen Hades spitting out a blade of grass to defeat an existence at the half-step divine spirit realm, he wouldn't have such an expression. He held 3 jade talismans in his hand. They were the 3 ancient jade locks. They were the source of his confidence. His cold eyes looked at Hades. Even if the other was an almighty, if he could catch him by surprise, the ancient jade lock could still bind him. At that time, he would be able to do whatever he wanted to him. Xiao Bai's gray eyes twinkled as he looked at the grand gold palace. He didn't move. Bufang was in that palace, so Xiao Bai wasn't worried about his safety. Thus, Xiao Bai thrust the burning red war god stick into the ground, making the ground shake. A moment later, the ferocious expression on Xiao Bai's body vanished. He stood still at his spot as if he was resting. When Hades Era saw Yenyu, he also saw the murderous aura in Yenyu's eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched as he rolled his eyes. Is this fellow an idiot? He released his murderous aura at I will just stand here and let him do whatever he wants. If he can make I lose a strand of hair, he will win. His eyes moved. Hades Era saw the flashing lightning and Chu Chongqing, who was tied on the ground. Chu Chongqing's pitiful cry made Hades Era's eyes twinkle. Thinking about the 2 times he had encountered lightning mantis, he felt sad. At this moment, Chu Chongqing had a feeling that they were both in the same boat. Thus, he walked to Chu Chongqing, squatted by him, and reached out his hand to touch the lightning. Compared to the previous lightning punishment, the power of this lightning was much weaker. The lightning shuttled back and forth in his hand, and it felt like a massage. It was quite comfortable. Yenyu looked at Hades Era as if he was looking at an idiot. He was worried that he wouldn't have a chance to attack Hades, and now, this fellow had shown his back to him. Did he want to die? Or did he not put Yenyu in his eyes? Yenyu's eyes twinkled. A moment later, he didn't hesitate anymore. He crushed the ancient jade lock in his hand. Sizzle, lightning flashed. A moment later, a long lightning whip appeared in Yenyu's hand. He snarled, his face contorting with rage. Die! Yenyu roared. The long lightning whip in his hand lashed at Hades Era. In just a blink of an eye, Hades Era was tied up. You're courting death. If you're that good, keep flicking me. Yenyu's eyes were crazy. He crushed another 2 ancient jade lock. He didn't feel safe with just 1 ancient jade lock. After crushing 2 ancient jade locks, 2 more lightning chains coiled around Hades Era's body. The lightning bolts were moving around randomly, bombarding the Nether King's body. Hades stood up from his seat with a bewildered face. He slowly turned around, his body twisting unceasingly. When the lightning struck him, it made him feel itchy. Was this fellow joking around? Hades Era turned around, his eyes falling on Yenyu's ferocious face. Yenyu's face froze. He saw Hades's face as if he was looking at an idiot. Although he was struck by lightning, he didn't look like he was in pain. How could it be? He was tied up by the ancient jade lock. How could he not feel any pain? Yenyu sucked in a breath of cold air in his heart. He felt that something was wrong. Do you know what the 2 things I hate the most are? Hades Era looked at Yenyu, twisting his body. Yenyu's eyes opened wider. His body slowly retreated, he wanted to run away. This arrogant fellow in front of him was stronger than he had expected. The ancient jade lock didn't work on him. First, I hate not having spicy strips to eat the most. Second, I hate people using lightning to hit you, handsome Sir Hades. Hades Era said each word slowly. A moment later, he stretched his body, and the ancient jade lock was broken. After a sizzling sound, there were no more lightning streaks. From a distance, Saint Daughter Zi Yun looked at Yen Yu as if she was looking at an idiot. He wanted to use the ancient jade lock to deal with her brother Ha. Her brother Ha was in existence who could defeat the 3 light-shaking brothers and shooting sun brothers. Seeing the ancient jade lock break, Yen Yu's mind shivered. Yen Yu's mind trembled. Without saying anything further, he turned around and planned to flee into the distance. However, shortly after, his body stiffened. His pupils shrank, and his entire body stiffened. Because he didn't know when a finger was placed on his forehead. Gulp, gulp. Yen Yu's entire body trembled. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and slowly flowed down his cheek. What did you say just now? You want I to keep flicking you? Do you want to be flicked to death? Hades squinted his eyes. His handsome face was cold and emotionless. His hair fluttered across his cheeks, making him look stern and stern. Flicked to death? You King want to be flicked to death? Senior, you must have misheard me, Yen Yu said with a trembling voice. Hades rubbed his face with one hand. His hair fell through the gaps between his fingers. Young people nowadays have such a heavy taste. If that's the case, I will reluctantly satisfy you. As soon as he finished speaking, Hades's finger on Yen Yu's forehead slightly bent. A moment later, he flicked it. Chapter 758. The entrance to the inheritance isn't at the bottom of this lake? Have we all been deceived? An expert's aura surged. The terrifying energy made many people around him not dare to breathe loudly. This was an almighty expert with an 8-step soul ladder. He was one of the top experts here. As he stood there, many people didn't dare to say anything. However, many people were suspicious. The place where the light shot up to the sky was here, but the entrance wasn't. Where would the entrance be? Many experts exchanged looks. These experts came from various holy lands. Of course, there were also experts from other forces. The Valley of Gluttony was finished. The inheritance of the Valley of Gluttony was about to be snatched. This news had spread all over the Hidden Dragon continent. Many forces had sent their experts to snatch it. Mu Cheng and Lu Jelly stood on a branch of a big tree. They furrowed their brows in doubt. Then they exchanged looks. They saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Could it be the entrance to the inheritance is over there? Mu Cheng seemed to think of something. Her beautiful face became excited. A grave expression appeared on Lu Jelly's meticulous face as he nodded his head. The two of them leaped down from the tree. Without anyone noticing them, they sped off in a certain direction and disappeared in a short while. Road of Gluttony's entrance. Wenren Shang held the bamboo flask, pouring a mouthful of wine. The thick aroma of wine filled the air. The entrance to the inheritance. No one would have thought that this inconspicuous road would be the entrance to the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. Wenren Shang poured another mouthful of wine into his mouth. Then, he continued to walk forward, entering the entrance. After a long time, a wanton and unrestrained figure slowly walked over. That figure's shirt was open, revealing his white chest. He held a star compass in his hand. Looking at the light spots on the star compass, his eyes narrowed. After searching for half a day, I finally found it. This Valley of Gluttony isn't small. I can't believe I got lost. Emoluji rubbed his nose. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Then, he opened his stride and walked toward the intersection. A finger steadily flicked on Yen Yu's forehead. Yen Yu immediately felt as if his head was going to explode. He staggered a few steps back. Hades' era didn't stop after playing for a while. He bent his finger and flicked it again. After flicking a dozen times, Yen Yu felt as though he had become a fool. In the end, Hades bent his finger. Bang! Yen Yu's figure was sent flying and landed on the ground. He did not move an inch as he coughed out blood. His eyes were lifeless. His forehead was swollen to the size of a bun. He had nothing to live for, his heart was dead. He was probably the only one who could spit out blood after being flicked in the forehead. Hades' era flicked his finger, and the corner of his mouth twitched. This guy's forehead was really hard. Even a flick like this didn't kill him. It was truly a pity that he wasn't able to satisfy this young man's hobby. Creaked in the distance, the golden gate of the knife skill hall creaked open. Bufang wore the vermilion robe, and his right hand was wrapped in bandages. He walked out with a calm expression. When Bufang appeared, Hades' era saw him. The latter's eyes instantly lit up. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Bufang. Xiao Bai's eyes twinkled. He also came in front of Bufang. He was quiet and peaceful, without the brutality and malevolence from before. Old Bu. Hades opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, Bufang raised his hand and stopped him. Bufang glanced at Yenyu, who was in the distance, and Chu Chongqing, who was tied up by lightning on the ground. His face was expressionless. He flicked his sleeves and continued to walk toward the next hall. He pushed open the gate and stepped into the hall. After a while, the hall closed. Hades and Xiao Bai looked at each other. They didn't know what Bufang was doing. After waiting for a while, Bufang walked out of the recipe hall and stepped into the next hall. Indeed, it was as Bufang had thought. Going to these halls was the foundation to obtain the inheritance. Since Xiao Ya had the Valley Master's bloodline, she had obtained special privileges, so she directly skipped these basics. Although it was a little troublesome, Bufang didn't mind. He could get many good things by going to these halls. For example, in the knife skill hall, the dragon bone kitchen knife had swallowed the tool spirits of those famous knives, which made the connection between Bufang and the dragon bone kitchen knife even closer. Bufang even felt that he could directly start the Divine Soul Realm's advancement test. However, after thinking about it, Bufang still gave up on starting it. His intuition told him to wait a little longer. After exiting one great hall, he stepped into another great hall and continued to complete the qualification tasks in each of the branch palaces. In the knife skill hall, he obtained a famous knife. In the recipe hall, he obtained a signature dish and so on. When Bufang walked to the 5 halls, he felt that his whole body seemed to have improved a little. At least, he personally obtained a lot of benefits. Boom, boom, boom. Just as Bufang completed the last basic mission, a hole suddenly appeared in the center of the hall. A spiraling hole appeared, and there was a flight of stairs leading down from the hole. Bufang glanced at the Nether King, then took a step forward and stepped down the spiral staircase. Hades hesitated for a while. Looking at Bufang's disappearing figure, for the sake of the spicy strips, he gritted his teeth and followed. Boom! 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 The hole was closed again. Only Saint Daughter Ziyun, Xiao Bai, the screaming Chu Chongqing, and the dumbfounded Yen Yu were left in the hall. Sounds of hurried footsteps arose. Outside the intersection, someone had arrived. Wenren Shang was drinking wine as he swaggered in. Behind him was Emoliuji, who was bare-chested. Not long after, Mu Qing and Lu Jelly had also arrived. When they saw the gold palace, their bodies shivered. No one had thought that the inheritance was actually in the road of gluttony. Mu Qing and the others had a crazed look in their eyes. Then, without hesitation, they dashed into the hall. However, shortly after, they came out. Their faces were filled with grief and indignation. The hall couldn't continue with the test anymore. Entering the knife skill hall, they only saw broken pieces of kitchen knives on the ground. Entering the recipe hall, they only saw recipes that had lost their charm flying everywhere. Mu Qing and the others were enraged. It wasn't easy to find the location of the inheritance, but they had lost the qualification to receive it. Which bastard did this? Mu Qing and the others were filled with grief and indignation. Big brother, you're so slow. Bufang walked down the spiral staircase. When he stepped on the pitch-black ground, Xiao Ya's voice resounded everywhere. Xiao Ye's inheritance has been obtained. Xiao Ye's pouting voice arose once more. A moment later Bu Fang's eyes brightened. Beams of light shot up from the ground, dazzling and resplendent. The entire underground space was illuminated brightly by the light. Looking around, Bu Fang couldn't help but take in a deep breath. This was because he discovered that his surroundings were actually empty space. The space was in the shape of a staircase, and there were 2 stoves on each staircase. Moreover, there was a figure wearing a mask standing on top of it. The staircase had 9 steps. On the 9th step, Xiaoye and Hua were sitting on chairs, swinging their white legs and pouting. Xiaoye's originally empty glabella had an emerald green crystal. That crystal was embedded in the center of her forehead, and there seemed to be a sparkling energy radiating from it. That emerald green crystal was the inheritance that Xiaoye had obtained? That thing is called the memory inheritance crystal. The so-called inheritance is hidden in that crystal. As that girl grows up, the inheritance in that crystal will blend into her mind, becoming one with her. Hades rubbed his chin as he explained to Bu Fang. No matter what, he was the Hades of the netherworld, so he still had some knowledge. It's just that I don't know if this memory inheritance crystal is a blessing or a curse for that girl. Hades smacked his lips as he said, "An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Old Bu, give I 3 spicy strips, and I will protect that girl for free for 1 day. How about it?" Hades' era moved to Bu Fang's side and said. Bu Fang looked at him for a while, then raised his black and white bandaged arm and said, "Look at the girl with horns beside that girl." Hades was bewildered. He turned his head to look, and a moment later, he sucked in a breath of cold air. 7-colored sky-devouring python? Oh my God! With that girl here, do you still want the spicy strips? Bu Fang's mouth twitched as he said. You young man. Naughty. Not to mention that this girl is not an adult yet, even if she is an adult. I can beat her 1 by 1. Hades's nostrils flared as he snorted. Bu Fang pouted his lips. He was too lazy to care about Hades, so he strode toward the slanted staircase. As soon as he stepped on the first step, Bu Fang's mind was in a trance. A moment later, everything around him disappeared like the moon in the water. Hades disappeared, and so did Xiaoye and Hua. What was left in front of him was an empty space with 2 stoves facing each other. On the stove, a figure wearing a metal mask was looking at him indifferently. His eyes were incomparably dull. What's going on? Bu Fang was bewildered, frowning. If you want to receive my inheritance, you need to confirm your innate talent. There are 9 steps of culinary arts, and each step has a cooking competition. What you need to do is to defeat all of them. Only then will you be qualified to receive my inheritance. Rumble. This deafening voice reverberated in the sky, and a huge figure was faintly discernible in the sky. Bu Fang frowned, glanced indifferently at the shadow in the sky, and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't say anything, but he used his actions to show it. Green smoke twirled in his hand, and the dragon bone kitchen knife emerged, falling into his hand. Buzz, the eyes of the masked figure on the opposite stove shone with a golden radiance, and a terrifying aura shot up to the sky. On the other side, Hades encountered the same situation. However, unlike Bu Fang's emotionless face, Hades' era covered his face with one hand. His hair fell through his fingers as he let out a long laugh. It was time for I to show my real skills. Chapter 759. Wavering light wholly land inside the rippling lotus pond, the green lotus leaves gently swayed. Pink lotus flowers were faintly discernible, and there were even flower buds waiting to bloom. It was too beautiful to behold. All of a sudden, the lotus pond boiled. The lotus leaves rustled and they slowly parted. In the green lotus pond, a giant flower bud rose from the bottom. A moment later, the flower bud spun, and the flower bloomed, filling the air with a sweet fragrance. A graceful figure stood up from the flower bud. A smooth silk cloth appeared in the sky and slowly drifted down. In the next instant, it wrapped around that person's beautiful figure. Her pink skin seemed to have a slight blush as the silk cloth gently slid over it. People couldn't help but stare at it. She raised her head, revealing a delicate face. Her head swayed and her long hair fluttered. Outside the lotus pond, there were experts bowing, their faces extremely solemn. "Milady, Chunlong's life token in the Holy Land is broken," an expert respectfully reported to the woman who emerged from the lotus. That woman's hair was in a high bun, and her skin was fair. Her exquisite face gave people an aloof feeling. Her eyes were indifferent. She stepped on the lotus pods and slowly flew out of the lotus pond. The woman's feet were sparkling, and each of her toes was like a beautiful jade that attracted people's eyes. Her entire body emitted an enchanting aura. Chunlong? An almighty expert who had the shooting sun bow, and his cultivation base had reached the half-step divine spirit realm, is dead? Besides the other holy lands, who else could kill him? The woman raised her slender hand, playing with her hair as she said coldly, "Milady, not only Chunlong, but Chun Tsang and Chungong are also dead. The 3 Chun brothers are all dead," that person reported. "Where did they die?" the woman asked. "The Valley of Gluttony," that person bowed, saying. The woman in the lotus was bewildered. Then, the corners of her mouth bloomed into a beautiful smile. "Very good. The Valley of Gluttony? I haven't settled the debt of the Valley of Gluttony's Valley Master for hurting me. You don't need to report this to the Saint Sovereign. I will go and check it out myself, and also solve some personal grudges." The woman's red lips parted, and her phoenix eyes slightly opened. A sharp light flashed in the bottom of her eyes. Heavenly Spring Holy Land. Amethyst Elder abruptly opened his eyes, and a black gas came out of his mouth. "Elder Ling is dead? Hu Han is also dead. They're all trash." Amethyst Elder let out a soft sigh. This time, the Heavenly Spring Holy Land had really suffered a huge loss. So many experts had fallen. This was completely unreasonable. "Unfortunately, I don't have enough time. Otherwise, I would personally go and investigate who it is that keeps going against me." Amethyst Elder raised his hand and slammed it down. The stone statue in front of him instantly turned into powder. Boom! The news that the Road of Gluttony was the entrance to the Land of Inheritance couldn't be concealed for a long time. After all, many elders in the Valley of Gluttony came from other forces. After analyzing and guessing for a while, they knew that something was fishy in the Road of Gluttony. Thus, many experts swarmed toward the Road of Gluttony. The leader was the Almighty Expert. His aura was sinister and his face was solemn. When they crossed the Road of Gluttony and saw the 10th road, everybody was excited. They all walked forward. Finally, they entered the place and saw the dazzling gold palace. Seeing this scene, almost everyone went crazy. That white pillar of light came from that palace, shooting up to the sky and into the clouds. What they saw on the outside was actually just a facade. There was actually another world underground. They didn't expect that there was such a big gold palace at the bottom of the Sunset Lake. There were many people in front of the palace. When they saw it, they all took a deep breath. Chu Changsheng's aura was weak. He was panting as he sat cross-legged. Saint Daughter Ziyun sat on the ground, her eyes drifting to the palace from time to time. Xiao Bai leaned on the war god's stick that was like a branding iron, standing at his spot. Xiaopi was lying on his head, blowing bubbles. Yan Yu's forehead was swollen. He was so confused as he lay on the ground, dying. Mu Cheng and Lu Jieli stood at the side, feeling vexed. There was also Wenren Shang, who was drinking, and Mo Liuji, whose chest was exposed. This group of strange people made the people who had just entered bewildered. Wasn't the inheritance right in front of them? Why didn't they take action? Were they waiting? What was there to wait for? There were some experts who were doubtful. After sizing up the Golden Palace, they stepped into it and headed towards the side hall. Shortly after, The experts stormed out with dark faces. Which bastard destroyed everything? Despicable! They didn't believe it, so they rushed to each of the side halls to check. In the end, they found that each hall was destroyed just like the knife skill hall. Many people felt like they were constipated. The leading almighty expert also felt a little aggrieved. Could it be that they could only look at the inheritance but not touch it? Could they only watch others get it? Could they watch others get so many resources? Since we can't get in with normal methods, we will fight our way in, the almighty expert said coldly. In the next moment, everyone was echoing each other and shouting, as if they were all supporting the method that the expert had mentioned. However, everyone looked at each other in dismay. Who should make the first move? Bufang held the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. He used a velvet rope to tie up his hair, his eyes indifferently glancing at the masked figure in the distance. The moment the battle began, the entire person's essence, energy, and spirit underwent a huge change. The biggest change should be the divine light in his eyes. A recipe appeared in front of Bufang. It was the recipe of the dish he was going to cook this time. Bufang scrutinized it and found that it wasn't a difficult dish. Thus, he spun the kitchen knife in his hand and began to cook the dish. The masked figure in front of him also did the same thing as Bufang. However, compared to Bufang, his movements were a little rusty. Obviously, compared to Bufang, he was much weaker. Although the steps and cooking process were meticulous, he didn't have the slightest flaw. After the dish was cut, he waved the kitchen knife, and all the dishes fell into the wok. The wok had been soaked in oil, so it was easy to cook and the aroma was thick. Bufang indifferently looked at the masked figure, the corners of his mouth rising. Then, he sped up his movements, cooking as fast as lightning. In just a blink of an eye, he had surpassed the first chef. Boom! 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 The wok shook and flames soared up to the sky. Bufang's face was calm. As the ingredients in the wok changed color, his mood became better. Sizzle, after preparing the plate, he poured the dish into the plate, then covered it with a thick layer of gravy. The dish was successfully cooked. Bufang's dish was covered with a lid, hiding its aroma and color. However, Bufang was confident. There was no suspense in this cooking competition. His opponent was a third-grade chef, lacking experience and patience. Facing this kind of opponent, Bufang felt that his patience wasn't bad. He tried to make his opponent keep up with his rhythm. On the other side, Nether King Ha flicked his head full of hair, starting his test. Honestly speaking, he didn't expect that he would be tested. However, since he could cook with his own hands, Hades felt that it wasn't bad. As for what Hades wanted to do, he didn't need to think with his toes to know what his choice would be. Hades covered his face with one hand, laughing. Bufang, this young man, if he doesn't give I spicy strips, I will cook spicy strips myself. I will shock this young man. Buzz, a recipe appeared in front of him. Hades squinted, looking at the recipe. A cold smile appeared on his face. Nether energy filled the air, and with a wave of his hand, the recipe was erased. As long as I have food in my heart, I can do it easily. I's love for spicy strips can create miracles. Hades mumbled for a while, then started to cook spicy strip. Era's brand spicy strips. He was looking forward to it. Hades's opponent was also a man wearing a mask. He was cooking according to the instructions in the recipe. His movements were smooth and skillful, which was pleasing to the eye. All of a sudden, with a thud, the masked man lifted his head, his eyes indifferent. Boom! Boom! Another explosion rang out, and the stove where Nether King Ha was standing had green smoke curling up. There was a faint burnt smell in the green smoke, which made people frown involuntarily. The masked man lowered his head again, continuing to cook. Soon, the dish was ready. The steaming hot dish was poured into the porcelain plate. A beam of light fell from the sky. The light beam enveloped the dish, and mysterious runes could be seen growing inside the light beam. Boom! A loud explosion rang out, shaking the entire stove. The beam of light seemed to flicker. Era opened his mouth, spitting out a mouthful of black gas. His eyes were filled with confusion. A moment later, a beam of light fell, covering his finished dish. Then, that beam of light flickered unceasingly, disappearing all of a sudden. A buzzing sound echoed around Era. Era was in a trance. Then, he disappeared from the stove. The clamor in the palace came to a halt. Everybody looked at the beam of light that fell, and the figure that emerged from it. They were all bewildered. The Nether King rubbed his stained face, and the corners of his mouth twitched. It was really shameful. He, the famous Hades Era, was chased out of this small inheritance land. Wasn't it just a little lacking in skills? His spicy strips were not as good as Bufang's spicy strips, right? Did he have to be so merciless? Opening his palm, there were several thick, black spicy strips. Hades's nostrils flared. He grinned, revealing his white teeth. Of course, Bufang didn't know that Hades had been eliminated. Of course, if he knew, Bufang wouldn't be surprised. That fellow's appearance was totally an accident. As for participating in the inheritance test, that fellow was just a joke. Of course, Bufang also knew that Hades didn't need the inheritance. The so-called inheritance was useless to Hades. Boom! The beam of light that covered Bufang's dish was full of mysterious patterns. Without a doubt, Bufang had won. The dish in front of him was crushed, and the beam of light shattered. The illusion in front of him disappeared instantly. Bufang found himself standing on the first step of the culinary path. It seemed that it wasn't as difficult as he had imagined. The kitchen knife in Bufang's hand spun. After twirling it for a while, he walked toward the second step. Outside the palace, a group of people couldn't bear it anymore. Someone summoned his true energy, stirring up the clouds. He wanted to attack the palace with all his might, blasting it open to obtain the inheritance. Chapter 760. The almighty expert in the lead had eyes as bright as torches. His aura surged, stirring up the energy around him. He stared at the golden palace with a hesitant look on his face. Unless he had no other choice, he would not resort to such a method. However, he really had no other choice. The way to enter the palace had been destroyed. If they wanted to obtain the inheritance, they could only forcefully destroy it and erase the palace that was blocking their way. Then, they would have a chance to get the inheritance hidden in the palace. Thus, many experts urged their auras, making the energy in their bodies surge unceasingly. Some people held their broadswords, which emitted sizzling light. Some people held swords, which emitted sword energy. Those experts from different places in the hidden dragon continent had a fiery look in their eyes. They wanted to use their power to destroy the palace and get the inheritance. Everybody wanted the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. Boom! The almighty expert in the lead attacked first. His breath was like an arrow, which turned into a jet of light, shooting toward the palace in the center. He wanted to pierce through the palace in one move. It was an attack from an almighty expert, and its power was really terrifying. When the others saw the almighty experts take action, they all roared, sending out all kinds of true energy. Instantly, the entire palace was filled with dazzling light. However, this dazzling light carried a destructive power that chilled people's hearts. Chu Chongqing and the others watched with cold eyes. Mo Liuji wore a playful smile as he played with the star compass in his hand. Looking at the others' attacks, he couldn't help but sneer. Those fools! This inheritance palace was built by the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. Generations after generations of Valley Masters had repaired and perfected it. Whether it was the formation or the defensive power, it wasn't something that these frogs in the well could resist. Using brute force to break the formation. How could they think of that? Even Chu Chongqing looked calm and collected. However, to be honest, Chu Chongqing was really calm. He sat cross-legged on the ground and quickly healed the wounds on his body. He began to heal himself. He just sneered at those people's attack. Soon, they would pay a price for their attack. When Saint Daughter Zi Yun saw Hades' Era, she became excited. She strode toward Era. However, right now, Era was a little embarrassed and disheveled. He was the lord of the netherworld, but he was driven out by an array. Was it really necessary? Didn't he just cook a weird-looking dish? The Nether King looked at the spicy strip in his hand, which was as thick as charcoal, and smacked his lip. Era rubbed the back of his head. Originally, he didn't want to make such a thick and big spicy strip, but he remembered how he couldn't enjoy eating spicy strips to his heart's content every time. Why not just make a thick and big one? That way, he could enjoy eating it to his heart's content too. Originally, he wanted to get a Hades Era brand secret spicy strip, but there seemed to be a small accident. The final spicy strip was a little different from what he had imagined. When he knocked the two chili strips together, the crisp and melodious sound made Era's eyes light up. It seemed like his spicy strips weren't useless after all, it could also be used as a brick in a fight. Boom! Just as Hades' Era was playing with the charcoal-like spicy strip in his hand, the expert's attacks landed on the gold palace. Rumbling sounds resounded, followed by a violent explosion. Rumble! The entire underground seemed to shake. A moment later, the gold palace flashed with a dazzling radiance. That radiance was extremely dazzling. Buzz, a wave of energy rippled. The gold palace wasn't damaged at all. It was like a tranquil datura flower, harmless to humans and animals. Many experts looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do or say. However, in the next moment, everyone felt their hearts tremble. A terrifying aura instantly spread out and enveloped their bodies, causing them to feel their bodies suddenly stiffen. A faint golden ripple spread out with the golden palace as the center. It brushed past everything. Chu Chongqing felt that the ripples were like a cool breeze, which made the pores on his body open. Emol Yuji's clothes fluttered, and the wind blew through his exposed chest. The experts who hadn't attacked felt that the ripples were like a cool breeze. However, when the ripples brushed past the experts who had attacked, their bodies swelled. Then, they exploded, turning into clusters of blood mist. The blood mist was so thick that it didn't scatter, the almighty expert roared. His aura surged, and his soul ladder emerged above his head, illuminating the stars. However, facing the gold ripples, the soul ladder above his head shattered, and the stars dimmed. His entire body was blown away, coughing blood. In just a blink of an eye, he was severely wounded. However, compared to the others, he was in a better state. He was just wounded, but he didn't turn into a blood mist. In just a short while, only a few figures were left from the large group of experts. Those people didn't survive because they were strong enough to resist the ripples, or because they had the means to resist the deadly attack. Either way, they didn't attack the gold palace. Everyone understood that the golden ripples would only cause harm to the experts who had attacked. As for the experts who hadn't attacked, it only made them feel as if a spring breeze had blown past them. The hearts of the people who survived trembled incessantly, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They didn't dare to attack anymore. Emol Yuji leaned against the wall, his eyes flashing strangely. The star compass in his hand bloomed with radiance, and there was a dazzling star in it. That star was located in the gold palace. What he was looking for was the demon in the saint's heart. At first, Emol Yuji thought that it was an easy task, but now it wasn't easy at all. He didn't know when the other would get out of the palace. What if he couldn't get out? With the evil nature of this inheritance, if the inheritance failed, he would be erased. The light column shot up to the sky, and the mysterious patterns expanded and twirled. The other's dish exploded one more time. Then, the illusion in front of Bu Fong dispersed. His face was calm as he clasped his hands. With one step, he reached the next step. Unknowingly, he had reached the 6th step of the 9 steps of culinary art. Bu Fong's face was emotionless. However, he could feel that every time he crossed a step, energy would pour into his body. Perhaps it was the so-called inheritance. The amount of energy pouring into his body wasn't small. If the system didn't absorb and convert it, this amount of energy would be enough for Bufang's cultivation base to increase rapidly. At least, it wouldn't be a problem for him to reach the divine soul realm with a 5-step soul ladder. Unfortunately, the system was like a bottomless pit. It absorbed and converted all the energy that poured into his body. Bufang felt that his body's quality was getting better and better, and his foundation was becoming more solid. Bufang had an impulse in his heart. It was the impulse to start the Divine Soul Realm test. As long as he completed the Divine Soul Realm test, he would be able to condense the soul ladder and become a Divine Soul Realm expert. Although Bufang was strong, he was just at the peak of the Divine Physique echelon, who had broken 9 Supreme Being shackles. Compared to a Divine Soul Realm expert, he was still lacking a lot. Of course, with the help of the Black and White Taoyes souls, as well as the Black Turtle Constellation Wok and the Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, whose spirits seemed to have awakened a lot, Bufang's fighting prowess wasn't any weaker than an existence with a 5-step soul ladder. As he took a step, the scene in front of him changed again. Bufang felt that his body was once again dragged into the chef's challenge. As he climbed the stairs, the opponents he met became stronger. Of course, the pressure on Bufang also increased. However, he was still calm and confident. As a chef, he needed to have confidence. The knife flashed, and the two of them entered the real cooking competition. In the sky above the Valley of Gluttony, the clouds surged. A moment later, the white clouds in the sky turned into a human face. The giant face looked straight through the sunset lake and saw the majestic gold palace hidden underground. The Glutton God's Palace. Rumble. The clouds rolled. A moment later, a light shadow flew out from the opened mouth of the giant face. The Glutton God's Palace has finally opened. And someone is going to pass the 9 steps of culinary arts? Then, that Taoyes heart will be born. The glowing silhouette muttered in the void for a while. Then, its figure suddenly fell from the void. Its speed was extremely fast. With both of its hands on its waist, it was like a cannonball as it pierced through the lake, causing the sunset lake to explode. It turned into a white line, heading toward the bottom of the lake where the light was shooting out. That light shadow did not slow down. Even when it saw the bottom of the valley, it continued to rush forward. Soon, it hit the bottom of the lake. However, the expected explosion did not occur. Instead, the glowing figure was absorbed by the ground like a speck of starlight. Outside the Valley of Gluttony, the void cracked. A huge gash was torn open. From that hole, a tall and sturdy figure walked out. His purple hair was wantonly, and this figure's body was covered with mysterious patterns. It was actually a puppet. Its eyes were pitch black, and it seemed to have intelligence. I, Amethyst Elder, will never give up on the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. I will rely on this inheritance to reach the next level. Anyone who dares to stop me must die. The purple-haired puppet's eyes widened. There seemed to be a whirlpool spinning in its pitch-black eyes. Green lotus leaves floated down from the sky. There seemed to be chanting and the sound of a zither. A green lotus head tore open the void and slowly emerged. On the lotus head, there was a beautiful woman wrapped in a light veil. The beautiful woman's eyes were like silk, looking straight at the Valley of Gluttony. Her red lips parted slightly. How many years has it been? The Valley of Gluttony has been ruined. Now that I, by Lientian, have returned, I will send the Valley of Gluttony on its last journey. The woman's hand was wrapped in a light veil. The veil brushed past her white and tender arms. The woman stood up. Her long and slender legs were as translucent as jade. Her toes stepped on the lotus head, and instantly, a sparkling emerald lotus seed flew out and landed in her hands. Her red lips parted, and the woman stuffed the plump lotus seed into her mouth. Her nostrils were slightly panting. In the next instant, the lotus head shook, tearing open the void and flying toward the Valley of Gluttony. Chapter 761. What appeared in front of Bufang was a huge spirit beast's leg. This was prepared by the land of inheritance, and there was another one on the opposite stove. Bufang squeezed the spirit beast's leg, feeling the bounciness of the meat. What else could he make with a spirit beast's leg? The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufang's hand. Because it had devoured so many famous knife spirits, Bufang could clearly feel the connection between him and the dragon bone kitchen knife getting closer. Every time he waved it, he could feel it clearly. The kitchen knife cut through the spirit beast's meat, and the sharp edge cut through it. The wild feeling of rushing into the meat with an unparalleled force made Bufang feel slightly intoxicated. A good kitchen knife would give a chef an unparalleled cooking experience. Processing ingredients was also a very important step in the cooking process. Bufang's movements were gentle, like a spring breeze, but his speed was very fast. The kitchen knife made many cuts on the spirit beast's leg, marinating the meat. The opposite stove steps were the same as Bufang's, both of them proceeding in an orderly manner. Their movements were almost synchronized, fast and accurate, like moving clouds and flowing water. If chefs from the outside saw this, they would definitely be very surprised, because they would be shocked to find that they could not keep up with the pace of their cooking. At the highest point of the 9 steps of culinary arts, Xiao Ye and Hua sat on the seats. They swung their white legs in boredom. The crystal on Xiao Ye's forehead glowed, and memories continuously flowed into her mind. She could also feel a strong power spreading in her body. This power made her head hurt a little. Hua hugged Xiao Ye's arm, her face touching Xiao Ye's arm, constantly rubbing it. It was as if she was enjoying the pleasant smell coming from Xiao Ye's body. This smell made her feel happy. Big Brother's speed is so slow. Xiao Ye raised her hand, rubbing the space between her eyebrows as she muttered. Hua squinted her eyes and raised her nose, her face leaning on Xiao Ye's arm. Bang! Suddenly, Xiao Ye's eyes narrowed as she raised her head to look at the 9 steps of culinary arts. However, the illusion was shattered. Bufang's vermilion robe fluttered in the wind as he slowly walked out with the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. Bufang took a step forward and stepped on the 9th stare expressionlessly. The beam of light that shot up into the sky seemed to be pouring energy into Bufang's body, making him feel as if his body had become more substantial. The 9 steps of culinary arts did not stop Bufang. As a chef who wanted to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, Bufang naturally would not be a hindrance to him. However, the so-called 9 steps of culinary arts was still a little challenging for Bufang. Although the difficulty was small at the beginning, the further he went, the more difficult it became. The test of cooking skills had become extremely strict. Any mistake could lead to failure, or the dish cooked by the chef couldn't be compared to the other chefs. Fortunately, Bufang was experienced and calm. He was very confident in his cooking skills. He exhaled softly. Bufang stood in front of Xiao Ye. There was a crystal shining in between Xiao Ye's brows. Bufang knew that it was Xiao Ye's opportunity. It was a crystal that recorded many inheritances. If this little girl walked out and people knew that she had obtained the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance, she would definitely become the target of countless people. After all, the one who obtained the inheritance wasn't some big shot, but a little girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Of course, the so-called, without the strength to truss a chicken, was just what Bufang thought. In fact, after obtaining the inheritance, Xiao Ye's fighting ability had become extremely terrifying. Bufang rubbed the little girl's head, which seemed to have awakened Hua, who was stroking Xiao Ye's head. The latter glared at Bufang and bared her teeth. This little girl was still holding a grudge against Bufang for using the kitchen knife to hit her head. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the 9 steps of culinary arts shook. In the next moment, a figure suddenly condensed, slowly taking shape in midair. This was a figure wearing a chef's robe and a chef's hat. His face couldn't be seen clearly, and no terrifying aura could be felt from him. Bufang and Xiaoya raised their heads to look at that figure. That figure seemed to be smiling. Taking peaceful steps, he quickly floated in front of Bufang and Xiaoya. "Congratulations on reaching the end and completing this Lord's test," the figure said. Bufang nodded his head expressionlessly. Xiaoya blinked her eyes and looked at him. Hua didn't care about him at all. He squinted his eyes, hugged Xiaoya's arm, and buried his head in it. When the light figure realized that no one answered him, he instantly felt a little awkward. However, he was originally a shadow left behind in this inheritance land, so he didn't feel awkward for too long. This little girl should be this lord's descendant. This lord can feel the familiar bloodline flowing in her body, so I obtained the memory inheritance crystal. I hope that this little girl can inherit this lord's bloodline, the light figure said. You are the Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony? The person who left behind the inheritance? Bufang asked. The light figure nodded his head, then looked at Bufang. You are not this lord's descendant, but this lord can feel a sense of fear from your body. This is very mysterious. This lord doesn't care what secrets you have. Since you have passed this lord's test, this lord will definitely not mistreat you. You definitely won't be able to obtain the memory inheritance crystal, but here is this lord's cooking manual, a top-notch famous knife, and a chance to help you break through the shackles of your cultivation. This energy injection is not the reward from the previous test. It is the true energy injection that can help you break through. This is also the reward that this lord left for the examinee, the light figure said patiently. His voice was filled with charm. Moreover, you have the chance to obtain the Taotia's heart. Taotia's heart? Bufang was stunned. The temptation that the light figure mentioned before was nothing to him. The so-called cooking manual was not something that Bufang really needed. He already had the God of Cooking set, so the so-called top-notch famous knife was useless to him. As for the energy injection, if it could help him break through one level, then this light figure was already amazing. Bufang's breakthrough wasn't that easy. Although there seemed to be a new way to break through, it wasn't as simple as accumulating energy. However, the Taotia's heart that the light figure mentioned piqued Bufang's curiosity and interest. When the light figure mentioned the Taotia's heart, the black and white bandage that wrapped around Bufang's arm instantly became boiling hot, as though it was hinting something to Bufang. Could the Taotia's heart be related to the black and white bandage? Bufang narrowed his eyes. The light figure did not say anything else. Instead, he bent his finger and pointed at Bufang. Specks of light gathered in front of the light figure. Finally, 3 huge balls of light appeared. One of them was a cooking manual that was written on parchment paper. It was densely packed with information and symbols. Bufang nodded his head and kept it. In another ball of light there was an extremely shocking kitchen knife. The handle of the knife was like the mouth of a ferocious beast, and the blade of the knife emanated from it. The last ball of light emitted sparkling and translucent energy. That energy floated above Bufang and instantly exploded. A storm swept out, turning into an energy vortex that revolved continuously. That vortex revolved above Bufang's head, then like a whale swallowing, it entered Bufang's body. Finally, nothing happened to him. The most terrifying thing was that the air suddenly became quiet. That light figure seemed to stare at Bufang, as though he had seen a ghost. What was going on? So much energy poured in. It was enough to help a 7-step soul ladder expert become an almighty. Why couldn't this young man even break through to the divine soul realm? The light figure was stunned for a moment, then looked at Bufang with a strange expression. In the next instant, he snapped his fingers. The 9 steps of culinary arts instantly split from the middle. That light figure turned his head to look. Ba-thump, ba-thump. Like thunder, it was deafening. The sound of a heartbeat made people's hearts palpitate. From the center of the 9 steps of culinary arts that had split open, tens of thousands of light rays slowly rose. A shelf rose up. On that stone shelf, there was a heart that was emitting tens of thousands of light rays. This is the Taotia's heart. It's also the Valley of Gluttony's greatest treasure. Even divine spirit realm experts dream of obtaining it. Rumble. As soon as the Taotia's heart appeared, the entire gold palace instantly became tens of thousands of dazzling lights, shooting out from within. Everyone's hearts were beating fiercely, and they could hear the thumping of their hearts in their ears. Buzz, on top of the light rays that shot up into the sky, a white light figure seeped out from within, winding around that light ray. With an explosive sound, countless lotus petals floated in the air, and a lotus head flew over from the outside of the road of gluttony. It was like a Sanskrit chant. Everyone was shocked, and they turned their heads to look over. At the intersection, a lotus head floated over, and on top of the lotus head lay an incomparably beautiful woman. Boom! With an explosive sound, a barbaric, burly figure barged in, roaring like a wild beast. Strands of purple hair scattered in all directions, striking the void. The Taotia's heart belongs to me. Anyone who dares to stop me, die. Bai Liantian's body swayed, as though she was dancing on top of the lotus head. Her charming eyes looked at the figure that flew down from the light ray, and her pupils instantly shrank. Chu Chongqing and the rest were instantly stunned. They did not expect that so many experts would appear at this moment. Feeling the terrifying energy fluctuations around these experts, everyone was as silent as cicadas in winter. Emo Liuji sucked in a breath of cold air, muttering in a low voice, "Heavenly Spring Holy Lands Amethyst Elder, Wavering Light Holy Lands Bai Liantian, and there's another one that I don't recognize?" This lineup made one's hair stand on end. Could it be that the purpose of these experts' appearance was all for Emo Liuji turned his head, and his eyes were like torches. He saw the sound of a heartbeat coming from the gold palace. Was it all for the Taotia's heart? Chapter 762. This was a heart that was emitting 7-colored radiant. It was about the size of 2 fists, and it wasn't very big. However, it was filled with dense vitality. Every time it beat, it would cause the void to tremble, and energy ripples would form. These ripples spread out in circles, emitting a unique kind of fluctuation. Bufang raised his hand, feeling the ripples pass through his palm. The dense vitality flowed through his palm and into his body. Bufang's eyes lit up. The vitality of this Taotia's heart was really dense. It was indeed a good ingredient. Taotia's heart, the broken heart of the ancient spiritual beast Taotai. It has a strong medicinal effect. It can revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. The taste is excellent, and it is filled with dense vitality. It can help people break through. The system's solemn voice rang out, and it reached Bufang's ears. Bufang was slightly stunned. It was really the Taotia's heart. Although it was broken, it wasn't a fake product like the black and white Taotais. It was the real Taotai, and its flesh and blood must be very precious. Even the white Taotia's meat that was imported from the West had amazed Bufang a lot, let alone the real Taotia's meat. To a chef, this kind of ingredient was hard to come by. If he missed it, Bufang wouldn't forgive himself. Xiao Ya's eyes widened. The Taotia's heart was emitting a multicolored radiance, and the little girl's face shone brightly, emitting a 5-colored radiance. The little girl's eyes were filled with curiosity. Hua hugged Xiao Ya's arm, and his head was by her side. He opened his eyes, and through the slits, he saw the Taotia's heart in the distance. However, Hua didn't seem to care much about this Taotia's heart. He just snorted, turned his head, and continued to hug Xiao Ya. This Taotia's heart. Bufang's eyes narrowed as he looked at the white light floating in the air. That light figure didn't say anything, and its figure floated far away. Baiguang's face was blurry, and no one could see his face clearly. Bufang exhaled deeply and didn't say anything else. He took a step forward and soared into the air. Stretching out his hand, he grabbed the Taoya's heart in the air. Thump, thump. The Taoya's heart trembled in the void as it continuously emitted vigorous life force and energy ripples. Bufang moved against the energy ripples, his hair fluttering in the wind. The arm that was wrapped in black and white bandages lifted up and spread open its fingers. Very quickly, it covered the Taoya's heart in front of Xiao Ye and Hua. The moment Bufang's hand grabbed onto the Taoya's heart, the heart stopped beating. It was only for a moment, and it caused people to feel extremely uncomfortable. Bufang narrowed his eyes. The silhouette in the void suddenly stretched its head, and its eyes revealed a look of excitement. Crash! From the Taoya's heart, streaks of light gushed out and condensed in the air. Very quickly, they turned into rainbow-colored chains. These chains were like thick veins, pulsating along with the heartbeat of the Taoya's heart. Huh! Bufang froze. In the next instant, he felt a terrifying suction force coming from the Taoya's heart. This suction force. It was continuously absorbing the true energy in his body. This heart. There's something strange about it. Bufang's eyes instantly lit up. His 5 fingers instantly grabbed onto the heart, wanting to crush it as it absorbed his true energy. The true energy in his body was being drained at an extremely fast speed, and Bufang's heart couldn't help but be shrouded in a haze. He felt that if he allowed this heart to absorb his true energy, it was highly possible that the true energy in his body would be sucked dry, and even his life force would be sucked away. This heart. There was something wrong with it. The silhouette's head stretched out, and a look of excitement appeared on Baiguang's face. Bufang seemed to hear waves of excited laughter lingering in the sky. This silhouette was scheming against him. Bufang gritted his teeth. He turned his head and coldly looked at the silhouette in the void. His 5 fingers were about to loosen, but he realized that the suction force had completely sucked his palm in. His true energy was continuously being sucked into it, and he couldn't break free at all. If this continued, his true energy would definitely be sucked dry. True energy surged into the chains, drilling into them, and gurgling sounds rang out unceasingly. Bufang let out a long breath, and his face became extremely cold. Green smoke twirled around, and then the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Once the pitch-black, unadorned dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufang's hand, and in the next instant, it fiercely slashed down on the chains. With a clang, sparks flew everywhere. Bufang's slash of the dragon bone kitchen knife was actually unable to break the chains. Don't waste your energy. You can't break free. This old man didn't lie to you. You indeed have the chance to obtain the Taoya's heart. However, just because you have the chance doesn't mean that you can obtain it. You little brat. Use your life force and true energy as nourishment to awaken this lord. The white silhouette let out a long howl, and its body trembled unceasingly. Xiao Ye seemed to have felt that something was wrong. She straightened her body and looked at Bufang anxiously. Hua, hurry up and help Big Brother. Xiao Ye said to Hua, who was beside her. She knew that Hua should be able to save Bufang. However, Hua only glanced at Bufang from afar. She blinked her eyes and shook her head. Then, she continued to bury her head in Xiao Ye's embrace. Her meaning was clear. She couldn't save him. Bufang was a little angry. He was actually tricked by someone. The owner of this silhouette was actually scheming against him. He wanted to use his cultivation and life force as nourishment to awaken the other party. Unforgivable. True energy entered the dragon bone kitchen knife, and the dragon bone kitchen knife instantly let out a dragon's roar. The dragon's roar resounded through the sky. It was as though a golden dragon's shadow appeared behind the kitchen knife. Bufang held the dragon bone kitchen knife with one hand and fiercely slashed at the chains. Sparks flew everywhere. The enlarged dragon bone kitchen knife became sharper, and it directly cut the chains. Poochie. It was as though a blood vessel had been cut, and an endless amount of energy was released. Rumble. Just as Bufang had cut one of the chains on the Taoya's heart, the entire palace shook violently. In the next instant, a crack appeared on the ground in the distance. A figure floated in from the entrance. It was a beautiful woman who stood on top of a lotus. Her feet were sparkling, and her beautiful legs were fair. Her long robe wrapped around her body, and it was faintly discernible. Her beauty was unimaginable, and it attracted everyone's gazes. Gurgle, it was as though a ball of water had seeped into the ground. Swish! A white figure suddenly appeared on the stone wall above their heads, and it was attached to the ceiling of the cavern. The moment they entered the inheritance ground, they saw the Taoya's heart, which was emitting a 5-colored radiance, in Bufang's hand. The white figure on the ceiling opened its mouth, and it revealed an excited smile. It's indeed the birth of the Taoya's heart. The white figure let out a long roar, and like a cannonball, it shot down from the ceiling. Its target was the Taoya's heart in Bufang's hand. Bai Liantian's eyes widened, and a hint of anger flashed across her beautiful face. She waved her hand, and in the next instant, the lotus petals that filled the sky turned into flying daggers. With a whistling sound, they flew toward the white figure. That frightening slicing power caused cracks to appear in the void. The white figure looked at the lotus petals, and his mouth split open, revealing a row of jagged, sharp teeth. His figure suddenly became transparent, and the lotus petals pierced through his body. They were unable to harm him in the slightest. "You can't stop me, Bai Liantian." The white figure let out a long roar, and in the next instant, he stretched out his snow-white fingers and grabbed toward the heart. "The Taoya's heart belongs to me." The white figure let out a long roar. Bai Liantian's eyes were filled with killing intent. "Die!" Bai Liantian shouted, and in the next instant, she took a step forward and soared into the sky. The lotus petals exploded, and Bai Liantian's speed became extremely fast. In an instant, she caught up to the white figure. Boom! However, just as the two of them were about to come into contact with the Taoya's heart, a terrifying pressure instantly spread out, and a gigantic fist shadow appeared from afar. An explosive sound rang out, and Bai Liantian and the white figure on top of the lotus petals unleashed their attacks to destroy the fist shadow. However, they were also forced to retreat far away. A purple figure with a tyrannical aura suddenly appeared, and an oppressive aura spread out. "The inheritance of the Valley of Gluttony belongs to me. Anyone who dares to block me shall die." This sudden change was something that even Bufang did not expect. The entrance of the cave cracked open, and the experts who were originally waiting outside rushed in. Then, they saw the Taoya's heart. After a moment of confusion, in the next instant, everyone erupted with excitement. A Taoya's heart. That was the Taoya's heart. The heart of an ancient spiritual beast. However, at this moment, Bufang closed his eyes, and a murderous aura appeared in them. He held the dragon bone kitchen knife in one hand, and his mind sank into his spirit sea. In his spirit sea, a golden divine dragon was wriggling and roaring. Bufang could not allow the Taoya's heart to continue absorbing his energy. He had to break the suction force of the Taoya's heart. He had to do something to stop it from continuing to absorb his energy. How could he stop it? How could he break it? Bufang was puzzled. Should he use the dragon bone kitchen knife to cut open the heart? Roar! The golden dragon in his spirit sea let out a roar, as though it knew what Bufang was thinking. In the next instant, it wrapped around Bufang's bandaged arm. The black and white Taoya's souls flew out and let out a ferocious roar. Then, Bufang's body trembled. The true energy that was originally absorbed by the Taoya's heart actually recovered rapidly. This recovery of true energy caused Bufang's eyes to light up. It was actually stolen from the Taoya's heart. Chapter 763. The appearance of the Taoya's heart was out of everyone's expectations. However, they were only stunned for a moment. In the next moment, everyone's eyes were filled with joy and desire. A Taotia's heart, even if it was a broken one, was still an incomparably precious item to them. If they could obtain it and consume it, their strength would increase tremendously. Hence, everyone's eyes were filled with fanaticism. Boom! However, the three figures in the sky who were fighting for the Taotia's heart caused their hearts to tremble. It caused their originally burning hearts to calm down at this moment. A treasure like the Taotia's heart was not something that they could easily covet. In the sky, Amethyst Elder's figure stood proudly, emitting a terrifying aura. Dense true energy revolved around his body, and a divine light shot out from his eyes. This was Amethyst Elder's clone puppet. Its strength was extremely valiant, and just looking at its terrifying physical body would cause one's heart to tremble. That white figure stopped, floating in the sky. His figure was completely clear, and it was actually a figure with white hair and white brows. His entire body was white from head to toe. His upper body was bare, and his figure was incomparably thin. That white figure's eyes were as sharp as swords, and he emitted an extremely terrifying aura. He coldly looked at Amethyst Elder, who was standing in the distance, and opened his mouth, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth. Bai Liantian's figure was voluptuous and beautiful. As she stood on the jade-green lotus, her entire body emitted a shocking charm. Her red lips parted slightly, and her hair drooped down. She twirled it with her fingers, and it was extremely enchanting. Heavenly Spring Holy Lands. Amethyst Elder? Bai Liantian said with a charming smile. Amethyst Elder's eyes were like torches as he coldly swept his gaze across Bai Liantian. His terrifying muscles trembled slightly, and a cold snort came from his nostrils. Palace Mistress Bai, I must obtain this Taotia's heart. I really need this Taotia's heart. If you are willing to give it to me today, I will definitely repay this favor in the future, Amethyst Elder said. His voice was slightly stiff, but at the same time, it was like a clap of thunder. Bai Liantian chuckled when she heard Huang Xiaolong's words. Her body trembled as she stood on top of the lotus. Amethyst Elder really knows how to joke. This Empress also needs this Taotia's heart. If Amethyst Elder is willing to give it to me, then this Empress can let Lord Amethyst Elder collect it as you please. Bai Liantian arched her body on top of the lotus. She revealed a charming look on her face as she looked at Amethyst Elder. Her tongue lingered around her red lips. Many of the onlookers felt their blood boil as their eyes burned with passion. The Wavering Light Holy Lands Princess Bai Liantian. She truly lived up to her reputation as the most beautiful person in the Holy Land. Her every movement, every frown, and every smile could affect people's minds, causing the heat in their bodies to surge uncontrollably. It was a pity that the Amethyst Elder had no desire for Bai Liantian at all. When he heard Bai Liantian's words, his eyes turned even colder. So Palace Mistress Bai's meaning is that you're not willing to give in to the Taotia's heart? Amethyst Elder said coldly. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Amethyst Elder, why are you talking so much to this bitch? Heavenly treasures belong to those who are capable. If you have the ability, why don't you just snatch it away? The white figure opened his mouth, which was filled with sharp teeth, as he spoke. Amethyst Elder's eyes turned and landed on the white figure. As for Bai Liantian, her face became as cold as ice. She turned her head to look at the white figure, and the aura on her body surged violently. You people from the Endless Sea dare to act so arrogantly in the territory of my hidden dragon royal court. White Shark, do you really not want to walk out of here alive? Bai Liantian said coldly. The white figure in front of her was not someone from the Holy Land. He did not belong to any of the 7 great sages' lands. However, the power that he belonged to was not any weaker than the hidden dragon royal court. This was because he was an expert from the Black Dragon Palace of the Endless Sea. Other than the vast land, the hidden dragon continent also had a boundless sea. The experts in the sea were not inferior to the hidden dragon royal court. In fact, the experts in the sea were even more terrifying. This was because the endless sea was simply too big. It was possible for a 10,000-year or even a 100,000-year spirit beast to appear there. Such a spirit beast, just its strength alone could reach a frightening level. The white shark in front of her was an expert from the Black Dragon Palace of the Endless Sea. The Black Dragon Palace was a peak force in the Endless Sea. It was a dragon palace created by the Black Dragon King, and it was invincible in the sea. The Black Dragon King was a legendary figure. He had long ignited his sacred flame and was a peak existence that surpassed a sect master. It could be said that he was a peak existence on the same level as the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Hidden Dragon Royal Court. This kind of person was not someone that Bai Liantian and the others could compare to. Just thinking about it made one's heart tremble. This was because the pressure of this kind of existence was enough to form a haze that shrouded one's heart. Of course, this white shark was not that strong. However, the relationship between the Endless Sea and the Hidden Dragon Royal Court was not good. This white shark actually dared to sneak into the Hidden Dragon Royal Court and steal the inheritance that belonged to the Royal Court. This was unforgivable. White Shark grinned. Then, he formed a seal with one hand and a magic array instantly appeared above his palm. As the magic array rotated, a gigantic long blade was pulled out from within the magic array. That long blade had a strange appearance. It was like a piece of wriggling meat, and there were many wrinkles on it. White Shark rested the long blade on his shoulder and let out a sharp, cold laugh. The three people's auras immediately became hostile again. Bufang raised his eyebrows. He suddenly felt that the true energy that was originally absorbed by the Taoya's heart was rapidly returning to his body. His body, which was already somewhat dried up, became stronger and stronger. The bandage on his right hand fluttered, and the two souls of Taotais roared. The spirit of the dragon bone kitchen knife, the golden dragon, also let out a dragon roar, and it set off a raging wave in Bufang's spirit sea. As the true energy returned to him, Bufang felt an extremely terrifying power spreading. That power calmed his originally restless heart. The white figure floating in the distance looked at Bufang, who was gradually calming down, and a look of disbelief appeared on that blurry face. In the next instant, his expression changed, and it seemed as though he was in danger. The figure of the white figure became blurry, and his expression changed drastically. "You! Damn it! You better stop it right now!" The white figure let out a sharp roar. He was frightened because he realized that the energy that the Taoya's heart had absorbed was actually rushing toward that kid's body, and it started to quickly return to him. Roar! The light figure suddenly released an extreme radiance, and it let out a deafening roar. Thump! The deafening sound of a heartbeat attracted everyone's attention. Amethyst Elder and the rest also turned their heads to look at the Taoya's heart. Thump! Thump! The heart was beating intensely, and every time it beat, energy surged out. Bufang's 5 fingers grabbed onto the heart, and he felt the surging energy entering his body. His face became slightly flushed. Bufang suddenly narrowed his eyes. He realized that the light figure had disappeared. With a bang, it exploded and disappeared without a trace. In the next instant, the Taoya's heart in his hand released a wave of resistance, wanting to push his hand away. Was it afraid? Did it want to shake him off? The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up. "If you want to absorb it, I'll suck it. If I want to shake you off, I'll shake you off. Do you think that I, Bufang, am a pushover?" Bufang said calmly. His voice was not loud, but it reverberated through the entire area. Then, under the strange gazes of the crowd, Bufang's 5 fingers opened up once again, and he forcefully grabbed onto the heart. The flesh of the heart was deeply indented. A sharp cry rang out from the ground. Everyone felt a wave of fear wash over them. All of a sudden, they looked in the direction of Bufang. That kid? What was he trying to do? Was he going to crush the Taoya's heart? Roar! The aura on Bufang's body suddenly surged. In the next instant, the bandage on his hand loosened, and it started to spin. The black and white bandage resonated with each other, revealing Bufang's exposed arm. That arm was filled with the image of a Taotai, and two Taotais were roaring at each other. Just looking at it caused one's heart to tremble. The black and white bandage seemed to have come to life, and it wrapped around the Taoyu's heart. In just an instant it wrapped around the heart. Rumble! The chain that was connected to the heart let out a trembling sound as it collided with each other. Bufang let out a long roar, and his arm bulged as he exerted force. It was as though he wanted to tear the Taoyu's heart from the chain. The roars from the ground became even more intense. Everyone felt their bodies go numb as they looked at Bufang. They felt that it was inconceivable. Amethyst Elder's eyes shone brightly. Great White looked at the meat knife in his hand, and his long and narrow tongue stuck out as he licked his saw-like teeth. Bai Liantian's charming eyes were like silk as she looked at Bufang. Her body swayed slightly. At this moment, the three of them were actually not in a hurry to make a move. They wanted to carefully observe the situation first. At the entrance, Nether King Erha and the rest also slowly walked in. The Nether King's face was black, and both of his hands held a thick, pitch-black spicy strip that was as thick as charcoal. From time to time, he would even weigh it in his hand. Chu Chongqing and the rest's faces were also deathly pale. They swarmed in and watched the scene from afar. Xiao Bai carried the war god's stick, and his gray eyes stared at Bufang, who was fighting with the Taoyu's heart. The sharpness on his body slowly appeared, and his body became sharp once again. Bufang's face was expressionless. However, because of the overflowing energy and boundless vitality, his face became red. He opened his mouth and energy leaked out from it. The vitality of the Taoyu's heart was too terrifying. That vitality was absorbed by the black and white bandage, and the black and white Taoyu's souls became even more violent. With a cracking sound, the chain that was entangled with the Taoyu's heart broke once again. The roars from underground became even more intense. Everyone's heart also shrank. Rumble, rumble, the Taoyu's heart, which was bound by the bandage, was beating violently. However, as it beat, the sound became softer and softer. The shape of the Taoyu's heart, which was wrapped by the bandage, became smaller and smaller, as though it was being swallowed. When there was only one chain left, it was still entangled with the heart. Amethyst Elder's eyes instantly emitted a shocking radiance. He finally could not bear it any more. The Taoyu's heart belongs to me. Amethyst Elder's body shook as he stood up. With a stomp of his foot, the illusionary void seemed to crack as he charged toward Bufang. It was as though he was a purple shooting star. A huge palm suddenly opened up, slapping toward Bufang. However, in the next instant, a pair of metal wings flapped. A red-hot iron rod swept toward him. The rod ruthlessly smashed into his body. Boom! The muscles on Amethyst Elder's body trembled. His purple hair fluttered, and he was not injured at all. His cold eyes swept past, landing on the god-slaying Xiao Bai in front of him. Chapter 764. Bothump, Bothump. The sound of his heartbeat became weaker and weaker. Bufang opened his mouth, and dense energy leaked out from it. He furrowed his brows as he realized that the Taoyu's heart, which was wrapped in bandages, was actually starting to merge with his body. Bufang's heart was also beating intensely. As it continued to beat, it actually started to synchronize with the Taoyu's heart. The souls of the black and white Taotais were roaring, and the bandages were constantly tightening. The last shackle that was binding the Taoyu's heart finally broke. In the next instant, Bufang felt that the Taoyu's heart seemed to want to drill into his heart, wanting to merge with it. Bufang's pupils shrank and he bit his lips. His eyes emitted a dazzling radiance. The roar from underground was so sharp that it seemed as though it was about to burst open. The 9 steps of culinary arts were filled with cracks, and it seemed as though it was about to collapse at any moment. In the next instant, the ground shook, and it seemed as though it was about to split open. The 9 steps of culinary arts were filled with cracks, and it seemed as though it was about to collapse at any moment. Return, Taotia's heart to me. Roar, 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 roar. The ground shook, and in the next instant, a giant palm suddenly stretched out from the 9 steps of culinary arts. It slammed onto the stone steps, causing them to shatter. It was as though a giant creature was about to crawl out from underground. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one would have thought that there was actually such a terrifying existence hidden underground. The aura emitted from the body of that existence caused many people to shiver. The pressure of the heavens and earth brought about by that existence was akin to black clouds that suddenly pressed down, making it extremely difficult for people to breathe. It was as though they were about to suffocate. A 7-colored radiance shone from Bufang's chest. The Taotia's heart seemed as though it was about to merge with his heart. However, Bufang furrowed his brows, and the look in his eyes became sharper. When Amethyst Elder saw this scene, he let out a roar. If the Taotia's heart was merged with him, it would lose its effect. To Amethyst Elder, this was something that he could not allow. As such, he had to stop Bufang from snatching the Taotia's heart. Just as he was about to move, a red-hot metal stick pounded on his body, producing a sonorous sound. Amethyst Elder rolled his eyes and looked at the puppet in front of him. Xiao Bai's ferocious head turned, and his gray eyes met Amethyst Elder's without fear. Amethyst Elder's body was filled with explosive muscles, and his purple hair fluttered in the wind. Although this was only a puppet of Amethyst Elder, its battle prowess was terrifying. Xiao Bai was also a puppet. When the 2 puppets collided, it seemed as if they were going to create inexplicable sparks. Scram! Amethyst Elder said coldly. Purple true energy seemed to surge from his body. Xiao Bai's hand shook, and the war god's stick twirled in the air. In the next instant, it whistled as it smashed down on Amethyst Elder's head. Bang! Amethyst Elder grabbed the war god's stick. Your puppet's combat prowess isn't bad, but if it wants to stop me, it's too weak. Boom! No one could see what happened, but Xiao Bai's body was fiercely hit. His body distorted in a weird way, and he crashed heavily onto the ground. Amethyst Elder's eyes were cold, and the explosive muscles on his body seemed to be circulating with terror. Although this clone of his was a puppet, its battle prowess was much stronger than that of a half-step divine spirit realm existence. Perhaps it was weaker than Bai Liantian, who had condensed her divine altar but had yet to light up her divine flame. However, with his terrifying physical body, Bai Liantian could not do anything to him. This was also the reason why he dared to negotiate with Bai Liantian. Of course, his real body was much stronger than Bai Liantian's. If Amethyst Elder's real body was here, Bai Liantian would turn around and leave without saying a word. After all, Amethyst Elder's real body was a sect master-level existence that had lit up his divine flame. He was not someone that a half-step divine spirit realm existence like her could deal with. The divine spirit realm was a realm where there was a clear distinction between levels. Even sect master-level existences could have a difference of heaven and earth, let alone a half-step divine spirit realm existence like her. Although Xiao Bai had evolved a lot, and his battle prowess was comparable to that of an almighty existence, he was still too far away from Amethyst Elder. Boom! The ruins collapsed. The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back spread open, and in the next instant, he turned into a beam of light and soared into the sky. Roar! Xiaopi's figure suddenly enlarged, and in the next instant, Xiao Bai stepped on Shrimpy with the war god's stick in his hand. He looked majestic and mighty. In the distance, Great White wanted to watch a joke. However, the moment the golden Shrimpy appeared, his eyes changed, and the meat knife in his hand trembled. Shrimp ancestor? He looked at Xiaopi and he couldn't help but roar. That was the shrimp ancestor that had disappeared? Why would it appear here? Moreover, it seemed to have become a puppet's mount? Using the shrimp ancestor as a mount? What kind of god was this puppet? The muscles on Great White's face started to tremble. Looking at Amethyst Elder, who was stepping on the air, step by step, Great White's heart trembled. It wasn't easy to find the shrimp ancestor. He couldn't let Amethyst Elder kill him with a single slap. Thus, Great White's figure trembled, and he planned to stop Amethyst Elder. However, the moment he moved, a pink lotus flower appeared in front of him. As the lotus flower rotated, energy was being nurtured within it. Great White, as someone from the endless sea, you should just stay here obediently. Bai Liantian covered her mouth and laughed. There seemed to be a hint of ridicule in her eyes. Great White glanced at Bai Liantian, and in the next instant, he waved the meat knife in his hand. That meat knife traversed through the air, and in an instant it turned into a huge mouth, swallowing the lotus flower. With a loud bang, the meat knife trembled, and it recovered. I won't fight with you for the Taotia's heart now. I have more important things to do. If you dare to mess with me again, I'll make you cry. Great White grinned, revealing his saw-like teeth as he coldly said. His eyes turned, and his gaze landed in the distance. Over there, Amethyst Elder's terrifying aura was already closing in on Xiao Bai and Xiaopi. Great White's eyes were very sharp. With a single glance, he could tell that the shrimp ancestor's cultivation was very strong. Although it was strong, it was only at the divine soul realm. It had not reached the peak of the shrimp ancestor. The shrimp ancestor had finally revived. If he was killed by Amethyst Elder just like that, it would be too unjust. The shrimp ancestor was the overlord of their endless sea. Amethyst Elder did not even put Xiao Bai and the mantis shrimp in his eyes. His gaze turned, and it landed in the distance. There, the chest of the kid who had obtained the Taotia's heart was emitting a resplendent light. It was as though he was about to fuse with the Taotia's heart. At the 9 steps of culinary arts, a huge crack appeared, and a huge palm slapped out from it. It was obvious that the existence sleeping within was about to awaken, so Amethyst Elder's heart was alarmed. If he wanted to snatch the Taotia's heart, he had to be fast. When the Valley of Gluttony was at its peak, it could suppress many holy lands. Who knew what kind of terrifying existence was sleeping within? Once a sect master-level existence was awakened, he would not be able to snatch the Taotia's heart with just this puppet. Thus, he had to end this battle quickly. After snatching the Taotia's heart, he would be able to escape far away. Once the Taotia's heart was in his hands, Bai Liantian and Great White would not be able to stop him. Boom! The purple true energy dissipated. Amethyst Elder took a step forward, and ripples appeared in the void. Suddenly, Xiao Bai stood on Xiaopi's back. The light on his body dissipated, and it turned into a magic array cannon. The sound of explosions rang out. The magic array cannon continuously emitted energy, smashing toward Amethyst Elder. Bang! Bang! Amethyst Elder did not dodge. He was hit by the energy cannon, and smoke and dust filled the air. However, when the smoke and dust dissipated, Amethyst Elder was still unharmed. The physical body of his puppet was too strong. Amethyst Elder's eyes moved, and his gaze landed on Xiao Bai. Annoying! Die! Amethyst Elder's anger surged. He had completely lost his patience with this puppet. With a loud roar, Amethyst Elder's figure instantly disappeared from the void, leaving behind only a series of rumbling ripples. In the next instant, he appeared in front of Xiao Bai. God-shattering palm. Amethyst Elder's palm emitted a brilliant light, and countless amounts of energy gathered, bursting forth with a frightening power. In the next instant it smashed down on Xiao Bai's head. If this palm were to land, Xiao Bai would definitely be smashed into pieces. Originally, Amethyst Elder still had some sympathy for this puppet. However, now only destruction was left. Anyone who obstructed him from obtaining the Taoye's heart had to die. A palm strike caused the void to distort. Xiao Bai's gray eyes coldly stared at the palm strike. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Amethyst Elder's palm. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and a hint of melancholy could be seen on his handsome face. The figure held a piece of black charcoal that looked like a brick. He gently raised it, blocking Amethyst Elder's palm's strike, causing Amethyst Elder's palm to be unable to land. Amethyst Elder's eyes narrowed as he coldly stared at the figure. Saint Daughter Ziyun, who was far away, was dumbfounded. She covered her mouth, not knowing what to say. Bufang clutched his chest. There was a colorful light circulating there. That Taoye's heart actually wanted to fuse with his original heart. This caused Bufang to be instantly enraged. "Get out of here!" Bufang's face was expressionless as he coldly said. His state of mind settled into his spirit sea. In his spirit sea, the golden divine dragon was roaring, twisting, and rolling. It caused the entire spirit sea to be filled with raging waves. The moment Bufang entered his spirit sea, his figure stood still. He looked into the distance. There, a blurry black energy rolled over. That black energy was blurry, but it occasionally turned into the shape of a spirit beast. The golden divine dragon's head suddenly drooped down, floating beside Bufang. It opened its mouth, and a dragon roar resounded. "An ingredient is just an ingredient. You actually want to fuse with my body." "Unforgivable," Bufang said coldly. In the next instant, he stopped the golden divine dragon, who was about to attack. With his hands clasped behind his back, he slowly walked toward that pitch-black spirit beast. That was the spirituality of the Taoye's heart. It wasn't the soul of the Taotai, but it was somewhat similar. Bufang took a few steps, and in an instant, he appeared in front of that black ball. That black energy surged, and the roar of a beast resounded. It was incomparably huge. In front of that black beast, Bufang was as small as an ant. Bufang's expression didn't change. He raised his hand, pressing on the spirituality of the Taoye's heart. In the next instant, his eyes slightly narrowed, and his 5 fingers suddenly clenched. The spirituality of the Taoye's heart instantly twisted and roared. With a loud bang, it was crushed into pieces, turning into dust that filled the sky. In the distance, the golden divine dragon's eyes were a little complicated, and there was a hint of admiration in them. Why bother? Fusing with the Taoye's heart can increase your strength by a lot. This kind of increase, even if the existence in your body can't stop it. The golden divine dragon's weapon spirit said. Bufang's face became slightly pale. He forcefully used the energy in his spirit sea to expel the spirituality of the Taoye's heart. He also felt a little weak. He calmly turned his head, looking at the golden divine dragon's weapon spirit. "Why do I have to fuse with it? It's just an ingredient." After saying that, Bufang's figure retreated from his spirit sea. In the next instant, Bufang's face instantly turned deathly pale, without any color. His arms suddenly exerted force, and the hand that was covering his chest suddenly reached out. The bandage fell down, and in it was the throbbing Taoye's heart. The heart that was originally going to fuse with his body was actually pulled out by Bufang. Chapter 765. Multicolored energy was dispersing. Accompanying the throbbing of the Taoye's heart, it continuously surged outwards. Everyone was stunned by Bufang's actions. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Taoye's heart was about to fuse with Bufang. Fusing with the heart of an ancient spiritual beast would bring unimaginable benefit. Who knew? He might even obtain the bloodline of a divine beast and obtain the legendary power of the bloodline. The power of the bloodline. That was the most precious thing in the world. Normally, the power of the bloodline of a divine beast was extremely precious and rare. Obtaining even a little bit of it would be a huge stroke of luck. However, this person in front of them was actually willing to give away such a stroke of luck. Xiaoya and Hua were sitting on the high platform. The two little Lolitas were swinging their soft, white legs. Flowery tilted her head, nuzzling Xiaoya. Her face revealed a surprised expression as she looked at Bufang. There seemed to be a unique charm that flashed in her eyes before disappearing. This human actually rejected the fusion of the Taotia's heart? It should be known that this was something that many people yearned for even in their dreams. Bufang's bandaged hand grabbed onto the throbbing heart. His face was incomparably pale, and fatigue could be seen in his eyes. The Taotia's heart was already halfway fused with the Taotia's heart, yet it was forcefully pulled out by him. This was a huge blow to his mental state. Furthermore, he had used his surging mental energy in his spirit sea to forcefully crush the spirituality of the Taotia's heart. At this moment, Bufang was incomparably exhausted. All he wanted to do was to return to his room and lie down comfortably on his bed to sleep. However, he was not done with his business. The Taotia's heart was still struggling and beating. Before the fusion was completed, it seemed as though it was about to break through the void and leave. However, Bufang's eyes were much colder. The spirituality of the Taotia's heart was definitely up to no good. Although there were many benefits to fusing with the Taotia's heart, his entire body might be controlled by the Taotia's heart. To Bufang, that was something that he would never allow to happen. System, if I really fuse with the Taotia's heart, what will happen? Bufang tried his best to suppress the drowsiness in his mind as he asked the system. The system was silent for a moment, then it opened its mouth. The Taotia's heart is the heart of an ancient divine beast. Once it is fused with the Taotia's bloodline, the host will become extremely powerful. Furthermore, the host's growth will not be limited by the system. What are the disadvantages? Bufang asked. After fusing with the Taotia's heart, the host's mind might be affected by the Taotai. Furthermore, the host's lifetime achievements would be limited. Being limited by the Taotia's heart, it would be even more difficult to become the god of cooking. Wanting to take that last step would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The failure rate is 99%. The system said coldly and sternly. The mechanical voice echoed in Bufang's mind, causing Bufang's body to gradually turn cold and stiff. The next moment, Bufang let out a long breath. As expected, nothing was as good as the original. Bufang suddenly rejoiced in his heart. I am me, the best me. Bufang was silent. In the next moment, his gaze landed on the Taotia's heart, and the corners of his mouth curled up. With a thought, black smoke curled up, and the black turtle constellation walk appeared in front of him. Placing the beating heart into the black turtle constellation walk, Bufang planned to keep the walk. Roar! The ground trembled, and cracks appeared continuously. A thick arm stretched out from the ground and slammed fiercely on the ground, causing the ground to collapse. It was as if a terrifying existence was about to awaken from its slumber. Hua straightened his body, and his eyes stared at the crack. He stared at the powerful existence that had crawled out. The triflower snake eyes narrowed as it stared at the crack. Amethyst Elder's eyes turned, and he retracted his gaze from Bufang's body. The Taotia's heart was not devoured, and this made Bufang heave a sigh of relief. As long as the Taotia's heart was not devoured, he still had a chance. If he could fuse with the Taotia's heart and refine the bloodline of a divine beast, his cultivation would definitely break through. He would ignite another divine flame, and he would rise to the next level. He would be able to obtain a place in the upcoming event. Initially, he had wanted to smash that troublesome puppet into smithereens. However, another figure appeared and blocked his attack. Were there so many annoying ants nowadays? Amethyst Elder's eyes turned, landing on the handsome young man in front of him. With a single glance, his heart trembled. This young man did not seem to be ordinary. His eyes were as deep as the pitch-black night sky. His pitch-black hair hung loosely, like a sharp spear that could tear the void apart. Who are you? Amethyst Elder asked coldly. His gaze landed on the pitch-black charcoal in the other party's hand. What kind of divine weapon was that? How could it block his attack? Hades' face was filled with melancholy. He did not want to make a move, but he could not allow this fellow to smash that lump of metal into pieces. After all, that lump of metal was Bufang's personal bodyguard. If he could save it, he might be able to exchange it for a few more chili strips from Bufang. Hades' finally understood that he was not suited to make chili strip. The chili strips he made were like a brick. Other than being inedible, they could be used for anything else. Bufang was still the best, to be able to make such fragrant chili strip. Imagining a chili strip going in and out of his mouth, Hades' nostrils flared, and a dazed look flashed past his eyes. You can't destroy this little lump of metal, Hades' said, covering half of his face with one hand. The corner of Amethyst Elder's mouth twitched. Where did this fellow come from? Could he speak properly? He sucked in a deep breath. Amethyst Elder's leg was as fast as lightning. He wanted to kick this person away. However, very quickly, he was dumbfounded. This was because the moment he raised his leg, he was hit by the black brick in the hands of the handsome young man. He was completely suppressed. What kind of divine tool was that black charred brick? Amethyst Elder's heart was filled with bewilderment. Roar. However, no matter what kind of divine tool it was, if it wanted to stop him from obtaining the Taoye's heart, then it had to die. Amethyst Elder let out a long roar, and a terrifying aura erupted from his body. In the next instant, he punched out hundreds of times. Every punch boomed, causing the void to tremble. Hades' hair fluttered in the wind, and the brick in his hands moved quickly. I block, I block. I block again. Boom, boom, boom. Amethyst Elder punched out one last time, and his figure retreated several steps in the void. Every step he took caused the void to tremble. His bulging muscles were constantly trembling. You're courting death. Amethyst Elder's anger surged, and he roared. His purple hair fluttered in the wind. Hades' hand shook, and the black chili strip spun once in his hand. He copied Bufang and twirled it. Then, Hades whistled. In the next instant, his figure disappeared from his original position. Boom. Amethyst Elder felt his vision go black. Then, he was hit by a huge force, and his head tilted to the side. At this moment, the air seemed to become extremely quiet. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Saint Daughter Ziyun even raised her hand to cover her eyes. Brother Ha, when you hit someone, don't hit their face. Furthermore, you hit this Saint Daughter's father's face in the distance. Bai Liantian and Great White were also dumbfounded. They did not know what this young man was doing. Was he courting death? He actually dared to use a brick to hit Amethyst Elder's face. Even though this was just a puppet of Amethyst Elder could still feel the pain of being slapped in the face. In the distance, many people held back their laughter. Of course, there were also people who could not hold back. Emol Yuji's chest was exposed, and he directly laughed out loud. The dignified Heavenly Spring Holy Lands sect master-level figure, Amethyst Elder, was actually slapped in the face by a young man. This was such an interesting thing. If this matter spread to the entire Hidden Dragon Royal Court, it would definitely become a joke after a meal. Amethyst Elder slowly raised his head, and the light in his eyes flickered. A terrifying aura slowly surged out. You dare to hit my face? Amethyst Elder raised his head, looking down at Hades' as he coldly said each word. Hades looked at the pitch-black chili strip in his hand, then looked at Amethyst Elder, who was like the calm before the storm. A faint smile appeared on his gloomy face. Boom. Amethyst Elder's head tilted to the side again. This time, his entire body staggered a step back. Amethyst Elder was dumbfounded. Everyone else was also dumbfounded. What happened? What the hell happened? That guy. How dare he? Of course, some people had seen Hades's terrifying strength, so they did not find it strange. However, no matter how strong Hades was, Amethyst Elder was even stronger. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Within the hidden dragon royal court, many people were incomparably respectful towards Amethyst Elder. However, it was precisely this kind of demonic godlike figure that was slapped in the face by someone with a brick twice. Saint Daughter Ziyin covered her face. She did not want to watch anymore. Bai Lientian and Great White also laughed out loud. Facing such a comical scene, the two of them could not help but laugh. Hades Era weighed the chili strip in his hand. He actually felt that it was really easy to hold in his hand. With a brick. No, with a chili strip in my hand, the world is mine. The anger on Amethyst Elder's body surged, and it was as though he had turned into a roaring purple dragon. You deserve to die. At this moment, what Taotia's heart? What breakthrough? All of that was thrown aside. Regaining his face was the most important thing. Thus, Amethyst Elder raised his head and roared at Nether King Erha. Roar! Bang! What are you roaring for? Why are youngsters nowadays so violent? Hades Era casually slapped the chili strip on Amethyst Elder's face. Amethyst Elder retreated a few steps. I'm slapping you. What are you going to do about it? Bang! Bang bang bang! Bang bang bang! Amethyst Elder wanted to resist, but every time he gathered the energy in his body, the brick would land on his face. He could not even block it. Gradually, everyone's laughter disappeared. Amethyst Elder's grievance was real. Every time that brick was swung, it would cause Amethyst Elder's aura to collapse. This young man. No, that brick was really not ordinary. Could it be a divine weapon that did not appear in this world? Some people seem to recall that this brick was brought out by this young man from the land of inheritance. Could it be? Bang! Amethyst Elder's head swelled up, and flames of anger surged within him. His figure shook, and he instantly retreated far away, increasing the distance between him and Hades Era. His eyes were sharp, and his killing intent soared to the heavens. Humiliating me, Amethyst Elder. I must kill him. Bang! In the distance, a violent tremor resounded. In the next instant, within the 9 steps of culinary arts, a huge figure instantly soared into the sky. Broken rocks filled the sky. Everyone looked at that figure, and they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. That huge figure's chest was empty, and rainbow-colored chains hung down from it. The heart in his chest was actually dug out by someone. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.